Hello, this is NosferaTuesdays, where a horror writer and a scaredy cat discuss the cinematic history of Nosferatu.
I'm Avishai. I am the horror writer in question.
And I'm Michal, and I am the scaredy cat. And the movie we're finally discussing today.
At long last.
The peak of our accomplishments. I mean, just because it was the movie we were working up to.
This is why one makes a podcast about Nosferatu in 2024.
Yes, exactly. And now it's 2025. So, but we will be talking about Nosferatu 2024, directed and written by Robert Eggers.
Yeah, and you describe yourself as the scaredy cat. And after we watched this movie, you confessed that this is the first one where you actually kind of lived up to that.
It was scary, and we can talk more about that in our scaredy cat rating. But I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. Hell yeah!
It would be so tragic if, like, after all this time, like episode 6, it's like, eh.
Well, I know there are a lot of people who are pretty mad on the movie.
Yeah.
Which is partly why I was so surprised. Like, you pitched me going into it that, like, I was either going to just, like, appreciate it for what it was but not like it, or, like, possibly like it. And I was like, I'm probably not going to like it. And I came out liking it. I want to see it again.
It's a good movie.
I liked it a lot.
I have now seen
I'm repeating that because I'm personally surprised.
It's good to sort of, like, do a gut check of, like, I liked it. Did I like it? Yeah, I liked it. Because I feel like Eggers also makes movies that are sort of generally designed to, like, sit with you for a while before you realize how you feel about it. Mm-hmm. We saw it together, the Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn, at a screening where we all got popcorn buckets shaped like the sarcophagus with a little stuffed rat inside. Still in
the back of my car.
There were like 4 people who showed up in matching rat onesies.
Yep.
And we asked if we can get a photo with them, and they said no.
Which is the first time that's ever happened to me. I mean, total respect. You do
Fair
not have
enough.
to be photographed. But, usually I'm just used to, like, conventions, and people are like, yeah, part of the reason you're in costume is to be photographed. But
yeah, but people were hyped. This movie got very hyped. I was just at a birthday party the other day, and there was somebody there in a vampire-esque attire, and she was doing that because she was really into this movie, and she hadn't seen the prior ones, but she was like, yay, gothic horror, romance, etc. I saw it a second time last night, this time at the Lincoln Square IMAX, which is the largest IMAX in the city, and it's a big old vampire. Enormous, but yeah, no, there's a lot to talk about, and I would not be surprised if this was another marathon run.
We might go along on this one.
Also, I apologize in advance for if I sound a little husky. I am fighting illness. I'm fighting the plague.
Oh, God. Let's not put too fine a point on it.
So, should we talk a little background on this version?
Background. Let's talk about, are we talking about the stage play?
Oh, if we're talking about Robert Eggers, we got to talk about the stage play. Robert Eggers, director of such films as The Witch or
The Vavitch.
The Vavitch, if you're a bastard. He doesn't call it The Vavitch, by the way. But
I feel like the title of the movie, though, like, completely, it's all you need to know about Eggers, which is, like, they didn't have W's back then in typography. So
yeah,
I don't either.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing about Robert Eggers. A thing about Robert
Eggers. Is there just one thing?
a thing about Robert Eggers is he... Let me take a step back.
Okay.
I feel like there are a couple of different schools of thought with regards to history in film. Mm-hmm. And on one end of the spectrum, you have Ridley Scott, director of films like Gladiator and Napoleon, who couldn't give less of a shit about historical authenticity. And, like, all the power to him. It's just sort of like... It's like period pieces for him are an aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's all in service of entertainment for him. It's not
it's not about understanding the past, it's about telling a story for people today.
Yeah. And so, if you go into his movies, into his period pieces specifically, and you are versed in any of this stuff, you might rip your hair out. Yeah. But if you're anybody else, you're like, hell yeah, the gladiator doing that thing there, that in a, with buildings in the background that were not there in that era, and and that didn't happen to that guy, but I don't care because it's fun. And like, that's him. Like and he's always been like that. He made The Duelists as his first film, which is, about, people in, I think it was period France. It's been a moment since I saw The Duelists, but like, it felt real. It felt authentic. And his follow-up movie was going to be this big historical epic that he was going to be inspired by sci-fi. Like, he had seen Star Wars, and he's like, ooh, I want, like, the outfits to be, like, unrealistic. And then that movie just didn't happen. But, like, that's one side of the spectrum.
Well, after the success of Gladiator 2, maybe.
I mean, at this point, he can do whatever the hell he wants. I saw his Exodus movie.
His Megalopolis is coming.
I would love to see Ridley Scott's Megalopolis because he's so frequent as a director. Like, he'll put out like 5 movies a year, and he's showing no signs of slowing down, and he's like in his 80s, and it's just like, hell yeah, just churn him out.
Do your thing.
I'd be really surprised if he's like, and now a left turn swerve. But anyway, that's one side of the spectrum of historical accuracy. And on the other far end of the spectrum, you have Robert Eggers, who has said in interviews he will never make a movie that takes place in the modern day. Mm-hmm. He does not have a taste for it. He does not want to ever show a cell phone on a screen. And you kind of get the sense that if he weren't making movies, he'd be making some other kind of art related to history.
Yeah.
Or he'd be a historian. He'd be a librarian. Like, all of his stuff.
I can definitely see him as a historical horror novelist.
Yeah, I was just listening to an interview with him today, and he was describing himself as like, oh, I don't have a very good imagination, which is, bullshit. Yeah. But he's like, everything that he gets is from research. Mm-hmm. And he is driven by the ethos of accuracy above all else, or authenticity above all else. If there was a fashion of the time, then they have to wear that fashion. If there was a belief at the time, then that's the belief that the characters have, and therefore that's the belief that the movie will have. Mm-hmm. And if there's a better way to do it aesthetically, no, there isn't, because we're going to go with what they do. It's all about that authenticity.
So I will say, like, as someone who is not a historian but loves history, there's a certain degree to which that is impossible.
Yeah.
Because there's so many blank spaces in history, especially when you're talking about kind of either more ordinary people or whatever. Like, there's just a lot of places that we don't have answers to things, and there's a lot of speculation. So the best intended, realistic whatever thing could be shown to those people at the time that you're depicting, and they'd be like, this isn't accurate, and I'm offended by this representation. But it's interesting because I sometimes think of historical fiction as like an inherent fantasy.
Yeah.
But I think that works perfectly for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reminded of Skinamarink, a movie that takes place in the 90s, and somebody was like, that kind of Lego wasn't made at the time. And it's like, yeah, but if you showed it to somebody at the time, I don't know if they would know. It's like, oh, what is that thing? That thing doesn't exist. They'd just be like, I guess there's a thing there. But right. like here, it's absolutely true that if you showed this movie to people in, Biedermeier period Germany, they'd be like, why do they all speak like Victorian English? Well, I mean, like, yeah, there's a bit of obvious fantasy, and then there's also just, a generalized vibe. Like, I think Robert Eggers just wants to escape into the past in general.
It's definitely possible.
And
but that's funny because he picks the most awful points in history.
Yeah. So, like, his 3 movies prior to this are The Witch, $4 million indie, big breakout for our little baby Anya Taylor-Joy. Anya Taylor-Joy, I think is how it's actually pronounced. Anya, yes, thank you. And, that one is about, early Puritans being fucked over by a witch. And also by their society's constraints, and also they're in that movie, they're essentially exiled for being too extreme. Mm-hmm. Nobody in that speaks any kind of English that we could really understand. Like, it's really kind of a battle to follow it, and it's like, well, we are trying to reconstruct how they might have spoken at the time. This follow-up movie.
Which I also admire, just because like that is something I think about a lot. Like how do the characters sound to the audience is different from how the characters would have sounded to each other. But it's also like how we would perceive them sounding to each other. Like you're trying to kind of find that middle ground, right?
Yeah. And he follows that thread with his next movie, The Lighthouse, which is turn of the century, I think like early 20th century lighthouse keepers.
Does it take place in a lighthouse?
And it's Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, and they are also speaking in a very heightened way of speaking that feels like it's designed to capture a way of talk that no longer exists. And that movie's in black and white, and it's very impenetrable, and I love it. And he followed that up with his one mega budget movie, The Northman, which is based on the story of Amleth, which inspired Hamlet, and you're following this Viking dude as he's trying to get revenge, for the murder of his father. And all of these movies just kind of, there is, beyond just, the visual aspect of everything has to look authentic, the way the characters think is a reconstruction, of how these characters might have thought. And we're just sort of thrown into that. There's no hand-holding. It's just sort of like, yeah, no, these Vikings are going to go on raids and just massacre innocent people, and that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. That's just the thing that they do. The problem is when you kill this guy's father. Doesn't matter if his father isn't particularly better than the person who killed him. Vengeance. It's like morality in Eggers' movies is always relative to the time and not necessarily shared by him making it. But it's sort of,
I would argue that is not the case for this movie.
Yeah, which I think is fascinating. Although there is sort of a spectrum there too, which we can get to. But yeah, and all of his movies also treat the occult as real as the characters would have treated it. In The Northman, the gods and whatnot and the spirits, and at one point there's a zombie knight essentially that may or may not be real, but if it's real to the characters, it's real to us. And it's the same with with the witch, and he feels a little bit like a really excited tourist in these eras who does not want to correct or reorient the perspectives of those eras. He might have opinions about them, but he's going to kind of just let it be, which is why what you're saying is so interesting, that in this movie there is a modern perspective kind of mixed in there. But yeah, so you started talking about the stage play, so about his history with Nosferatu.
Well, so I mean, I've listened to the poor man and read interviews with him, like repeat the story like 60 times now, but apparently his own personal lore is
he has a script at this point.
Yeah, right. But like at some point in his childhood, he saw a picture of Nosferatu and wanted to like watch the movie. And, it was probably the very early 90s or the late 80s. And it took a very long time to get that, little VHS. But he watched it and he became obsessed with it. So in high school, he put on a black and white stage play of the 1922 Nosferatu, with everyone painted black and white. And apparently the person he did it with is like a famous dramaturg now or something. And
yeah, like an opera director.
Yeah.
Blanking on her name, and I wish I had it in front of me. But yeah, no, he likes to talk about how the video of Nosferatu that he watched was like a low rent, like fuzzy copy, which made it feel more real to him. And that's what excited him.
Sorry, Ashley Kelly Tata.
Ashley Kelly Tata, yes. Okay, cool. So he likes to talk about how the video that he watched was fuzzy and poor quality, and how that made it more real to him. And again, like that just comes back to the whole real element, of like this feels like found footage. Like I can't see the grease paint, or the seam of the bald cap right now. I just see this bizarre image, that's just creepy, and it's stuck with him. He did this play, which, as I understand it, is a lot more expressionist than the movie was.
That makes sense.
He likes to talk.
I mean, it was made by a high schooler, so.
Yeah, but I also mean like in terms of like more Dr. Caligari, like slanted sets, and, very artifice. Whereas the actual original Nosferatu wasn't very expressionist most of the time. He likes to say it's German Romanticism, which is why it was set in the 1830s as opposed to the 1890s when the book came out, because that was too recent.
Right.
Which again, very like Egger's connecting to that of like I don't want it to take place in a time period that I can remember. I want it to take place in a time period that I can romanticize. And the Biedermeier period, the rise of the middle class in Germany, and it's all of that excited him, and he's been trying to make this movie ever since The Witch, right? Like 2015, he had a draft, and it just kept falling apart until eventually it didn't.
I'm glad. I mean, and he's mentioned that he thinks it's probably best that he had to wait till this point when he had more experience and just, knew his way around the set. And he has collaborators now that he works with very closely. The cinematography in this film is stunning, like gorgeous beyond comprehension. And it's really great that, I guess for his aesthetic, he has been able to develop these relationships that make these movies, like whether or not you appreciate the final product, like they are very beautiful to look at.
Yeah. I was just listening to a podcast that was describing it as like he makes movies like they are objects to hold, like these finely crafted objects as opposed to necessarily experiences. I'm not sure I totally agree, but like I get the sentiment there. It's very designed. It's the anti-Herzog.
For as realistic as it is, it's like, oh, you just happen to be standing there in this perfect window and the center and the lights hitting just, but, I think The Witch, the subtitle is a New England fairy tale, right?
I believe so, yeah.
So it's interesting that nothing like that is appended here. We're just going with the Nosferatu because there are strong fairy tale vibes to like specifically this version of the story and the way Eggers tells it, in my opinion.
In the script, the very first line of dialogue, which I bet they recorded and they cut, is "Once Upon a Time."
Okay.
And the very first track of music on the score is called "Once Upon a Time." Mm-hmm. So it's fully a fairy tale. And I just gotta say, just talking about the design of it, it feels like the anti-Herzog because
yes.
And and I've seen clips of Herzog talking about this, how Herzog does not like storyboards, right? He says that if you use storyboards, you're a coward, which is so beautifully him. Whereas Eggers, like every single thing is fully storyboarded, fully designed. He's like he doesn't like spontaneity on set. And it's actually funny listening to him talk about the Herzog version, where he's like, "Yes, I've seen that in my life, but I went out of my way to not watch it for this."
Mm-hmm. Which is so funny because there are a lot of similarities.
There are. And he readily admits it. I mean, like I gotta say, he seems a lot more gracious in interviews now than he was with the Northman.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Has he had some media training?
Maybe, or he's just grown. I mean, I just remember with the Northman, he had a harder time with that because it's like $100 million movie, and suddenly there were notes and cuts, and he felt like he wasn't in charge of the final version. And I just remember even before it came out, he was whining about it. Essentially, he was just complaining. And I remember at the time thinking like, man, I wish I had that thing to complain about. And like now he's like, yeah, I kind of regret complaining about that. That's the way it goes. And but he also likes to talk about. He likes to credit his collaborators. Like if somebody says like, oh, you did XYZ. He's like, well, actually, so-and-so did XYZ. He in an interview I listened to today, he mentioned that he was deeply involved with the marketing, and they're like, okay, so I can credit you for the marketing. He's like, no, you have to credit the Focus Features marketing people for the marketing. They did a great job. Like, that's all lovely. And so him talking about the Herzog stuff, he specifies that even if he didn't rewatch it for this movie, he has seen it, and therefore it must be an influence, like conscious or not. And of course other Herzog movies he cites as an influence. So but he does say that he thinks that Herzog might hate his movie. but it is an interesting way to look at it, because instead of this as the next iteration iterating on prior versions, it's sort of circuitously just another straight iteration of the original, kind of a different branch from the Herzog one, as opposed to the next step of it,
right?
Which is neat.
we should make a Nosferatu tree.
A genealogy. Get Vincent Price and narrate
like
it.
all his fingers, the branches, and like.
Oh my god, too many joints in his fingers.
So many joints.
Oh my
Such
god.
long nails. Oh god.
And right before we kind of jump into it, the very top of the movie, when we have the production company logos, they're all in the style of, like the Piranha Pictures logo from the original movie, where it's like that kind of hand drawn, white on black.
Yeah.
It's super neat.
Yeah. The detail is really impeccable. Yeah, I don't know. I there's a lot to like. Should we dive in?
One more thing.
Oh yes, okay.
One more thing before I forget. So he had a hard time with the Northman because it is a big movie and that's how it goes. On this one, he had Chris Columbus and Maiden Voyage Pictures producing. Chris Columbus and Eleanor Columbus created the company Maiden Voyage. Chris Columbus directed the first Harry Potter movies.
Yes.
And he was inspired by his relative lack of control of that to make a company where it's like, we're going to pick some filmmakers we really like and we're going to give them total control.
Oh, okay.
And so while Chris Columbus was on set for like all of this and had input and ideas and whatnot, at the end of the day, at least based on the interviews, Eggers was the override.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because of that, I think Eggers listened to Columbus a lot. Mm-hmm. He cites him a lot as inspiration for various little things, and I have a feeling that that kind of collaboration where it's like ultimately you make the final call, but I would like to offer my expertise. Mm-hmm. I bet that worked out well for the production.
Well, you would think it would generally, but
you'd hope. You'd hope.
Go back to first principles and writing groups, people.
Yeah, although sometimes you gotta override an asshole director. or steer an inexperienced one.
Right. All right, so
dive in.
One thing I want to say right off the bat, people have been referring to the time period that this movie is set in as Victorian. It takes place in the early 1830s. Victoria became queen in like 1837, so that is not accurate.
So what would it have been?
I want to say Georgian.
Okay.
Very, very, very late Georgian. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that like let me look this up. 1 second. just to get it right, but I'm like close to being sure that I'm right. Yeah. June 20th, 1837 was when, yes. And then she took over from William, I believe. Yes. Yep. From King William.
Okay.
Whose father was
Henry?
George III.
George. I don't fucking know. You're the one who knows such things.
Revolutionary fame.
Okay.
It's funny. My interest in English history like strongly like goes in and out depending on kind of like the fashion. But
this is. I mean, it's funny that people are referring to this in English periods at all.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because it's a British received pronunciation throughout, which. He says in the interview, it's like it's British received pronunciation and Cockney for the lower classes, and it's like yeah, but it's Germany. It's the Biedermeier period. I've learned the word Biedermeier.
But it's also like it's very Chernobyl. It's Russia, but
Yeah, which I'm actually trying to think. Like, is this the first time that Eggers has done this, where he hasn't tried to kind of institute the accent of the actual, culture that he's depicting? I'm trying to remember if the Northmen did this. I feel like they did some, Scandinavian accents, and certainly on the Vivitch and the Lighthouse, they're doing their whole thing, But here it's sort of like, we're not going to do German. I kind of wish they did. I feel like that'd be really funny.
Maybe they filmed another cut like Herzog, except it's not in German. It's just German accents.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, so we begin. Right.
So we start, and there is a young woman named Ellen who is begging for someone to come to her.
Yeah, we meet Lily Rose Depp as this version of Ellen / Lucy / Mina. Mm-hmm. And right off the bat, she is sending DMs into the void. She's upset. She's clearly having a hard time. She's an outcast. She's calling out
But
for
she's wealthy. I think
she's super wealthy.
Clear to start that she is from a wealthy family.
She is from a wealthy family, but something's wrong in her life, and she's upset, and she's calling out to a spirit of comfort, spirit of anything, and she is visited by the shadow of Orlock, speaking Dacian, Proto-Romanian Dacian, which had to be reconstructed for this movie.
Of course.
Thank you, Robert. Saying, "You woke me up."
There might be several interludes of Avishai doing the Nosferatu voice in this podcast.
I was having a long, nice nap, and you woke me up. You are not for the living. And she's super into this, and she starts to orgasm then and there, but then she starts having a really bad time.
Yeah, she starts to have a seizure outside. It's not a fun time.
She sees Orlock, which, by the way, I just want to point out, because I have the script here, that the script says image lasting under 12 frames, a horrible naked corpse-like demon. He knew he was directing this, but it should be pointed out Ellen is underage in this sequence.
Yeah.
She is effectively accidentally calling upon a predator who is just torturing her right out the gate. And this is our, it's been 30 seconds. We've already had our first big departure from every other version that we've looked at.
Yes. This is obviously in no previous version do we get a prior connection between Ellen and Orlock. And yeah, as you say, right off the bat, we're
there aren't any bats in this one.
I know. That's one of the marks against it. We'll talk about some of the others.
Right off the rat. Right off the cat.
Oh my God. But, I think there's a couple of things that this sets up that are worth just having out there. First of all, this is Ellen in her nightgown, which I think is an important image because it's something we'll see much later, but it's also kind of the least amount of clothing that she's wearing. And I'm not talking about that for any particular reason other than that clothing and society are very closely tied in this movie, and societal expectations. And it's also clearly a sexual experience for her. I also think that this scene might kind of hold the key to one of the flaws of the movie that I see, which is that and look, I genuinely don't know how you would do this, you can't really have oh man, what's the movie with the two dogs where they eat spaghetti?
Lady and the Tramp?
You can't have a Lady and the Tramp scene of them falling in love, but there is, I think, a certain gap between what Ellen is we're told more that she is receiving something or satisfaction or something from Orlock that more than we actually see that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It seems like it's just sort of implied that because he's not part of the order, he can give her what she's otherwise not getting,
mm-hmm.
and because he is as forward as he is,
right?
But to your point about the wardrobe, it's interesting that to the degree that Eggers cares so much about historical authenticity, within that, the wardrobe is so controlled, and it's all very the colors of the wardrobe is always really muted. She's in this white sheer nightgown in this opening scene. Later on, there's a scene where she is in a room that has blue and white patterned wallpaper, and she is in blue, and her friend is in white, and it's all very controlled. I've seen some knocks against this movie that I think I'm going to disagree with immediately, where it's well, this movie feels too grounded, it's too real, whereas the other versions have a sort of a dreamlike quality, and I get that to a degree, but when something is this controlled and this styled, I don't know if I can call that grounded. It just feels like the artifice is there, even if it's not necessarily neon lights.
Right. I feel like you could maybe describe it as someone of the period, or our perception of someone of the period having this nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I also just want to give a shout out to costume designer Linda Muir because
holy
shit, the costumes to me in this movie make what is otherwise a very, I don't know if you would call it terrifying, but there's a lot of things that are unpleasant to look at in this movie, but it makes things inviting somehow in a way that like
it's cozy.
Yeah, and like the clothing, even though it doesn't look like our version of comfortable, the characters seem comfortable. But they also, I don't know, everyone seems to be outfitted in a way that they should be. And yeah, I don't know, it's really excellent work.
Everyone's sort of in their place. Nobody's pushing against the boundaries of the world that they're in, really. Who isn't a villain?
Yeah.
And even them, they curate them. Yeah. But yeah, no, so that's our opening, and Eggers has said like there are two things that he wanted to bring to this adaptation that like he thought like the reason to make this movie, aside from the fact that he just wanted to do Nosferatu, like what are the two things? And the first of those two things, we'll get to the second one later, is he liked the idea of Ellen being our way in from the very beginning. Because in the other versions, it's Thomas's story with the occasional. It's funny
because the first shot is of Ellen, but then we really meander around toward her being.
Yeah, and like in every other version, if it's like it's really aggressively a Thomas story, but then it kind of like becomes an Ellen story. Here, we'll see, it does become Thomas's story, but we're sort of reminded like, but don't forget, this will be Ellen's story. And it's a big swing, it's a big choice that feels very modern. Protagonist in the opening frame,
right?
Which, by the way, I would you can have a good discussion about who the protagonist of this movie is.
Oh.
Because you could argue it's Orlock.
I would still definitely side with Ellen, but I think the antagonist is maybe more up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, that's also just a genre thing, right? Like, who's driving the story? Who's making all the choices? Who's doing all the things?
Yeah.
And anyway, we are like 45 minutes into this, and we are on the opening scene.
Well, anyway, okay, so we now like pop forward a couple years.
It says years later.
Yes.
Doesn't say how many.
And Ellen is married to the sweet and just puppy dog faced Thomas Hutter, who is I love him. Nicholas Hoult.
Nicholas Hoult in his second Dracula movie in as many years. He also he played Renfield in Renfield, and he was the fellow who goes to the castle. Poor Hoult. But here, Ellen wakes up to find that he's not in bed next to her. By the way, they have separate beds. Again, we're back to Herzog.
Yep.
He's already dressed. He's ready to go. She's horny. She's like, our honeymoon is too quick. Come back to take off your shoes. She just aggressively wants to make out with him, and he's like, nope, gotta go to work.
Yep.
And he goes.
And he's dressing while this is happening.
Oh,
he's putting on his cravat and.
Yeah, he's got his hat on at this point, and like you can tell that they like each other, but we're being, it's pretty established at this point. Like she wants more than she's getting. When he leaves, she says he has the position already. We got the cat.
We do get the cat, and the cat's name is
Greta. After the actress who played the original Ellen. Greta has no master or mistress. Yes. As Ellen says in this movie.
Yeah, but I think it, right from the go, like it is very important that there really is love and connection between these two that I think we will see intensify through the story. But like, I think they both, again, have kind of different ideas of what it means to be dedicated to that relationship.
Yeah.
I think for Ellen, obviously she's calling her a rebel is not entirely accurate, but she has a rebel spirit in that she is counter to the norms that are around her. And she wants affection with, sex and enjoying time with her husband. And for him, I think it's pretty obvious that he's like, well, I'm a married man. We live in a small house. My wife comes from a wealthier family than I do. And the way I show love to her is by becoming a wealthy man.
Yeah. And, he owes money, on a loan from his best friend. But yeah, no, I mean, Eggers in his interviews has said that he didn't want to have people from out of time in this movie. Like, he didn't want to have like proto suffragettes, like fencing, as he puts it.
Yeah.
But Ellen does feel like she's just born in the wrong period. She doesn't. She just doesn't know how to put it into words.
Yeah.
Like she's still following the rules of society, but you can tell that she doesn't fit.
Right.
Which is cool. It's a nice little gothic, twist in the whole thing. I mean, Thomas typically in these movies, Thomas, Jonathan, etc., is a dumbass.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
he's kind of on a scale from like neutral to negative as far as dumbassery.
Yeah, like you look at the original movie, he's just a happy idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously it's a style, but like he tends to be like why are you doing this, man? This is more pain and effort than it's worth. And here we get like a pretty decent reason.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to provide, and he feels like he can't really start a family, which he says to his bestie, which we'll get to. It's like he doesn't feel like he can really start a family, have a life, until he no longer owes debts, until he's finally made it. And so like money's a big motivator, and that feels very modern too. It obviously that's throughout human history, but I feel like that's relatable.
Yeah, it's relatable, and I think it's a really important thread in the movie. And I think it's also, worth kind of pointing out, obviously, like this is an era before birth control. So like whether or not they start a family is not entirely up to them, you know? And I guess Thomas not sleeping with her in the very beginning is like, I mean, it's partly like, well, I have to go to work and da-da-da, but it's also, I don't want to get you pregnant, and that's echoed in obviously the friend in Friedrich and Anna, who we'll meet soon, but they have 2 children already and have a third on the way. And as I think will become significant, Friedrich continually says that he can't keep away from Anna.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk a little bit about them and kind of circle back, because I do think it's pertinent to everything that we're saying. Like when we do, like a couple scenes from now, we do go to the Hardings, who in the original movie are siblings apparently, but like
Ew.
it's the characters of Harding and Ruth are apparently siblings, but like they're so thin in that movie, they're not really characters. Like here, okay,
This is really the first time that they've stood out as characters.
Yeah, like they've existed in every version, right? This is essentially the character of, from the novel Lucy, from the Herzog version Mina. This is like, and pick any one of your men from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Right.
But it's interesting how, so Aaron Taylor Johnson plays Friedrich Harding, who Craven the Hunter himself. And in this movie, like,
it was probably the performance that was hardest for me to buy, but I will say that I enjoyed it in that kind of like, if we're talking about like the campiness of this movie, like he was going full camp.
He's so buttoned up, in a way that,
like sticking out his pinky, like oh boy, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah, it's all very performative in a way that I could buy people in that station of life would have, and money would be that kind of performative. But he acts so put upon, like he pretend like he's a good friend in the sense of, like Thomas needs a loan, I'll give you a loan, don't worry about paying me back. Oh, you need me to watch after your wife, I'll watch out. But also, it over the course of the story, it really kind of takes a toll on him, and he feels like he's not getting sort of the gratitude that he deserves for it, because it's like it's just a lot on him.
That's why I think the confrontation scene between him and Ellen much further down the road is one of the pivotal scenes, at least thematically, of the movie.
Yeah. And then you also have, his wife, Anna Harding, played by
Emma
Corrin, fantastic in A Murder at the End of the World. And more recently, Deadpool versus Wolverine. Or Deadpool. And Anna is Ellen's best friend. Like they sometimes kiss each other. It's it's
dear heart, etc.
Yeah, they're really close. She's she's a mother of 2. She's super like there for her, but also like kind of looks at her like, oh, you poor dear.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're a little touched in the head, aren't you? It's very like it feels authentic. Like she really does care, but also she doesn't really get her.
I think, yeah, there's a barrier to understanding. Just I think pure comprehension. It's very clear that Anna is most comfortable when, excuse me, when Ellen is, playing her normal role. Every time she's like wandering along the beach and thrashing about in bed, it's very uncomfortable for Anna, which, on the one hand, understandable. But as far as like the themes of the movie of her being part of the kind of the correct world, you can really almost see, like, not to fan fiction this out like too hard, but like if they grew up and they were friends because they were both from a higher class, right?
And the mansion is immense.
Exactly. And Anna is like, she kind of follows the right path, right? Like she is she's blonde. She like, has clearly the social graces.
She marries rich.
Exactly. Whereas Ellen has fallen from grace, we learn from her family, and then marries this much poorer man. So it is that kind of like almost noblesse oblige,
Yeah, it's kind of a charity case. Mm-hmm. But you can tell that she loves her. It's just
okay, here's the thing. I think that every relationship in this movie is genuine.
Yes. Oh no, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's also kind of key to all of this. Like whatever sort of frictions of understanding they have are societal. Mm-hmm. Like Anna just doesn't have the toolkit. Right. And if she did, she would use it. Mm-hmm. It's just she just can't put herself in that position because it's sort of outside of what she understands. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she has these two little Muppet children who are, I believe, both dubbed.
Yes, they are.
Super cute kids.
Maybe my least favorite part.
Oh man, but
the monster.
I mean, there's something so beautifully horror about the fact that throughout the movie they're like, "There's a monster under our bed." It's like how much of that is just the kids being kids, and how much of that is like they know.
Yeah, that seemed a little on the nose to me. I'll be honest.
Yeah, but they have another kid on the way, and meanwhile Thomas and Ellen are not having kids, but Ellen like fully is like willing, like ready to have sex with Thomas in that mansion. Yep.
In their living room, basically.
Yeah. And it really struck me on the rewatch, like at this scene of like, because we'll circle back into the scene that we skipped ahead, but like, Thomas has to leave Ellen and she takes it poorly, but then she kind of has to come around because look, this is how things work in this world. And I'm gonna be the person I'm supposed to be in this world. Fuck me on your best friend's carpet. Like it's like she's a little feral.
She is. I think feral is a good word for it. I mean, like, look, later in the movie, much later in the movie, Von Franz will describe her as like kind of a misplaced priestess of Isis out of time, which is like, on the one hand, a little maybe overstating it, but also you can kind of see it.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And she's connected to.
It's like, what it's like? It's like she was supposed to be in the Northman, but she ended up in Nosferatu.
A little bit, because when Thomas gives her those flowers, and I think this is in the original too. I don't know if we mentioned it at the time.
Yeah.
But like when Thomas, we're just gonna Benjamin Button our way backwards through this movie. But when Thomas gives her the flowers to apologize for leaving, her reaction is like, "Why did you kill these?" Yeah. like these beautiful lilacs. A lot of lilacs in this movie. Yeah. But like, it's like. She's like a child of the earth as opposed to a child of society. But she doesn't have the wherewithal to describe it that way because she doesn't have the centuries of hindsight that we do in perspective, in all the same ways that we won't be able to describe what our weirdnesses are until like a few hundred years from now. And it's like we have new terms for that.
But I think it's also worth noting that like, as far as like Christian iconography, like it's very it's present in the movie. I wouldn't say that it's prominent or determinative. It's like it definitely is there and it has a place, but it doesn't seem like Ellen's answer would be to find like comfort in her religion.
Oh, she specifically doesn't. I mean, there's a scene. We're just bouncing around.
Yeah.
but like, there's a scene where she's walking, with Anna through the beach cemetery. The beach cemetery. Woo! Although in this one, I will say one of my criticisms is in the other two, it's a beautiful image, and in this one, it's the location of a dialogue scene every time. But But she has that walk and talk with Anna where she's like, do you ever have that feeling that there's this thing outside that's coming? And Anna's like, that's the grace of God. And I was like, no, it's not that. Anyway, let's reverse a little bit.
All right. Thomas Hutter leaving his wife in bed.
Yeah. He's late, and yet his boss is eager to give him a promotion.
Okay, so Herr Knock,
Knock,
that he is called in this movie because German does not have a soft K or a silent K sound, which also confuses me because they spell it in the original as N-O-K, which means you can just say knock, but anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Somebody who knows German, let us know.
Was it N-O-K in the original?
I believe so.
Someone else will check.
Yeah. Anyway, Knock is so normal in the opening scene or in his first scene, and I was like, oh, this is a different take. Like they're kind of presenting him as like a legitimate businessman. And like obviously there's some like sinister stuff going on, but he's very, when you meet him in the other movies, it's like, 2 seconds away from like the knocking his fingers together. And this guy seems legit at first.
No giggle fits.
Yeah.
It struck me that the way that Eggers frames it, Eggers loves his unbroken wonders, except sometimes he'll have tense dialogue scenes where we're going to cut back and forth. And the shot of Thomas talking to Knock in the scene, Knock, the shot of Thomas, he's like center frame, like he's sort of trapped in the image. Mm-hmm. And Knock is like, it's a wider shot. He's smaller, kind of a little distant. He's like across the room, standing stiffly, talking from across the room. And it feels so creepy to me. But yeah, so like in the prior versions, we either got Jewish vibes, like, Jewish stereotype vibes out of him, or he was played by a Jew. Here, I think it's neither.
I agree. We'll get to it, but the Nosferatu rating here is quite low for me.
Yeah, there is some stuff that I do want to talk about on that front that's kind of left field.
I'm excited.
But I will say, like Knock in this feels more like a Dickensian character to me. Which, by the way, in the smaller budget other 2024 Nosferatu remake release, featuring Doug Jones,
Nosferatu the second.
Yeah. The version of Knock that they have in that is like full Dickensian villain. Mm-hmm. Like he receives like his newspaper from a newsie, and the newsie like holds his little hand out for a tip, and Knock's like, leave. and here, like, he's not that, like, he just seems like an employer. He's got his art jokes. He does the whole like, oh, there's this eccentric count with one foot in the grave, so to speak. Yeah. Which I think is in the I think it's in both prior versions. I think it's in the Herzog, but I think it's in the original. But like here, he's he sounds more reasonable. He sounds like a severe boss. Yeah. And he has like a whole cadre of like identical guys who are like, you've kept him waiting a half hour, and he goes like, no, it's Providence. It's great that you're late. Yeah, I'm still working on the papers. But shows him a map like, oh, you got to travel out to Transylvania. And there's the papers with like all the weird like hexes on it that he kind of covers up basically. And Thomas is like not super into it. He's like, I'm recently married. He's like, yeah, but I have to insist, and we're gonna pay you a lot of money. He has a lot of money. He's gonna pay you a lot of money. And I sympathize with Thomas a lot more in this one than in the prior ones. Yes,
I think the external pressure feels more present, and whether that's Friedrich or Knock or whatever, it really felt evident to me. And I mean, it could also be, like, honestly, Nicholas Hoult is a likable figure, when he wants to be.
But like, I've seen the menu. Like,
that's true.
he can play like. He's like, we're always going to love Nicholas Hoult, but he can play assholes,
That's true.
He can play people that we pity.
I think, I guess, I don't know. This is part of the reason I love this movie. I feel like all the thematic parts like fit like Legos, they really snap together. And Thomas's likability is tied into the like capitalist lowercase c, really, but the financial demands that are on him and the social demands, which are essentially financial demands on him.
And it all comes back to he wants to be a good husband. Like in the other 2024, well, technically 2023, but it was released this year. The lower budget remake. Thomas is like a philanderer. Like he like sleeps with a local in Romania. Like here though, like he's very much a wife guy. It's just that there's that one thing that she needs that he's not, which is rough sex. Like
gives it to her later. I mean, it's kind of like what wife is under the dictionary in the society.
Yeah.
Ellen is not in that picture.
Correct. By the way,
she wants to be, you know, because they love each other. Again, it's very genuine. It's just,
and also, what else is there to be?
Right.
Yeah, you're either a rich wife or you're a poor wife. That's kind of it.
Yeah.
But by the way, Visberg in this movie, gorgeous.
Gorgeous, very obviously a set.
Yeah. No, they built it. It's very fairy tale-ish.
Yeah.
CGI extensions, but like it's very pretty. They're not filming in the Netherlands. They're not filming in Germany. They're filming in make-believe 1830s Visberg, which again, a fictional place. But yeah, Thomas apologizes to his wife, drops her off at the Hardings, and travels. And this leads to one of my favorite sequences in the whole movie. Honestly, we get the locals. And by the way, like every frame in this movie is just sort of like a romantic painting from that era, like him cresting that hill overlooking the inn. I think there was like a specific painting that people pointed out that evoked.
Of course there was.
But yeah, he's such a babe in the woods when he shows up in Romania, because like the locals in this, like, are Romani with a capital R. Like they're dancing around him. They're you know, it's
tambourines and bells and
there's a guy there who has bizarre main character energy. Played by the Czech actor and singer Jordan Hodge, who apparently like if you're Czech you would know who that is.
Oh, okay.
But it's so, like, there's this beautiful wonder where, like, Thomas is sort of looking confused, walking through, like, a crowd of Romani who are, like, playing tambourines in his face, doing, like, slap dances, doing, like, limbo dances. And it all just ends on this shot of Jordan Hodge just leaning in the doorframe in, like, full, like, Captain Jack Sparrow, like, regalia. And he just starts laughing. And everybody just starts laughing. And I want to spin off about this guy. I'm looking at the Wikipedia and it's like languages of this film: English, Romanian, Romani, Dacian. But the innkeeper himself is not Romani and you know, does not like them and does not want to, you know, when Thomas says he's here for Orlock's castle, he's like, get out of here. It's like, I'll pay you double. It's like, okay. Yeah.
There's no book.
There is no book, but there are a lot of signs.
There are a lot of signs, including, I guess, a show and tell.
Yeah. So, like, first of all, the most interesting version of the inn that we have seen, probably the least cozy.
Yes, definitely.
It's a lot of smoke and fire.
Up to and including the version in Shadow of the Vampire.
Yes. Although Eggers did hire a Romani woman who came to some fame on TikTok making Romani dishes. Oh. So there's somebody in the back. Again, the authenticity. It's like I can't speak for Romani people watching this movie. It's like, I don't know if anybody would be like, hey, what the fuck? Yeah. But like, it's clear that he did his homework about details. Right. But there's like, he goes into the inn and there's a woman saging the place with garlic. It's like I cast thee out with garlic, you know, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and there's a whole ritual going on.
Oh yeah. He finds himself walking through the woods.
As one does.
Yeah, following a maiden who is nude on a white horse.
A virgin, as we're told.
Yes. And she...
Presumably the horse as well.
I mean, who knows, but didn't ask. But
a white stallion.
I think she leads them, like the combination of her on the horse leads them to the location of where a vampire is buried.
Yeah, main character energy guy and a whole bunch of other Romani folk are following the horse. With the naked virgin on it.
I really hope there was something under that curls.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, it's...
God.
I'm not saying nobody in the
Uncomfy.
history of the world has ever ridden nude on a bareback horse, but...
Well, so like, in the trailers, like they digitally cover her up a bit, which means it was somebody's job to do that.
Right.
And I wonder if there was somebody's job to do the reverse.
Maybe.
But yeah, no, they find a grave, and it's like, the grave of the vampire, the grave of, they open it up. There's like a woman in the background yelling like, look for its tail, look for its cloven hooves. And somebody gets a stake of iron and hammers it into this dead body that spits up blood. And
vomits up blood, really.
Yeah. And Thomas is like, what the fuck? And everybody's like, oh, we have a visitor.
Yeah.
I want to point out the second thing that made Eggers really excited to do this movie was to do a folk vampire, as opposed to let's come up with the rules for this movie in particular. It's like, no, what did people believe at the time? And here we get a whole blend of that. Like, I'm sure the cloven hooves and tails thing was a thing.
It's actually not something I've ever heard, but
yeah,
that doesn't mean it's,
But I bet that was a thing. I mean, like, for somewhere in the world, because you have all sorts of different...
Yeah. Well, definitely the blood around the mouth. Like, if you dug up a corpse and they had blood around their mouth, that was part of the proof that they had been a vampiring.
Yeah, a vampiring. And also, apparently, like, the iron stake... He said this in interviews. He said he didn't want to get too into it in the movie because it might be a little too much info. But apparently, like, the point in folklore was... That's not the thing that kills the vampire. That's just the thing that pins it to the ground. Then there are other things you have to do to kill it. But like, yeah, but you pin it to the ground so it can't get away. Which is interesting. And I know that versions of this have made it to America and like, the 1600s and whatnot. Even later.
Like there was a case in Boston, I think, that was supposedly found in Bram Stoker's notes.
That tracks. But it's
awful. It's like a whole family died, basically.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this kind of brings us back to why Albin Grau wanted to make the original Nosferatu. He believed in the occult. He believed in vampires, and he wanted to do something that, resembled that. And so here, Eggers is kind of doing the same thing. Eggers doesn't believe in vampires, but he wants to tell a story in a world where people do, and he wants it to accurately match what they would have believed them to be.
Right.
Like, the main Hagamakum for our Hebrew listeners.
Yeah, which is also interesting because Orlock does not really follow those.
Well, he doesn't. We can get to that.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Thomas wakes up in bed.
GTFOs.
He wakes up in bed.
Yes, but his feet are muddy.
Yeah. Which is the first of many times that he's going to get roofied in this movie.
I do sort of wonder, not to go down too much of a garden path, but I wonder if like the Romani were like, this was their version of Listen to the Locals, trying to kind of cue him into what was up. Yeah.
Well, I on second watch, it sort of reminded me of like when you go into surgery and they anesthetize you, it's not the same as tranquilizing you. Like it does, but it also like you stop, creating memories for a while. And so the subjective experience is just sort of like, I'm there, well, I'm not there anymore. Oh, that's weird. Oh, when did the change happen? And I feel like that's what's happened here. Like, I bet that they had a whole conversation. They probably interrogated him.
Right.
And then they did something to like knock him out and make him forget. And you could tell that they were unsatisfied with whatever they got out of him, because he gets out of bed and they're all gone. And they've stolen his horse.
They've stolen his horse.
Yeah.
And I know this is not your ideal Herzog version of the trek to Orlock's castle, but we do have Thomas carrying his own saddlebag.
Yeah, no, I think Herzog's version of the endless climb to like Valhalla is probably my
Valhalla.
Yeah, like just that endless climb to the Wagner music, to eventually ascend and ascend and ascend and ascend and finally meet Dracula. I think that's still my favorite take on this. But I gotta say, once upon the rewatch of this, where I no longer am like comparing in my head, this sequence is gorgeous. It's very beautiful horror how he encounters the stagecoach. The horses, and super dreamlike. Like he distance contracts and he's moving without moving, and there is no driver. There is no driver. The horses rear up to like stomp on him, and when he opens his eyes, the whole thing's been rotated 90 degrees. He floats in. It goes to the castle. The wolves are chasing this thing. He goes to the castle in a shot that looks very much like the 1931 Dracula, with the Borgo Pass.
Mm-hmm.
He looks up and suddenly he's actually just standing at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is so subjective perspective
mm-hmm.
and so disorienting that I completely forgive Thomas and like everything that happens to him in his castle. All of his bad choices that he typically makes, where the audience is like, what are you doing to get out? Here it's like, he's not in control of himself right now. Like, dude is just being roofied on the reg.
I mean, honestly, like, his whole journey in this movie is not being in control.
Yeah, this is a... There's a lot to talk about with that. But he gets to the castle and the doors open on their own.
Okay, so before we do that, I just want to talk about, for a second, the filter.
Yes.
Because the filter is one of my favorite things in this movie, because I was watching it and I was like, I didn't realize that this was black and white in parts. And I was like, but it doesn't quite look like it's black and white. And then you told me that, like, basically the camera people?
The director of photography, I'm going to pronounce this so poorly, Jaron Blaschke.
Yeah, so he apparently came up with a filter that removes all the light, all the colors that you cannot see at night. So it's not quite black and white, but it is almost black and white, which was amazing because I kept being like, yeah, this kind of looks like when I get up in the middle of the night to pee. Like, it's that kind of like what it looks like.
Oh yes, my moonlight piss.
Yeah, I mean it's like slightly violet-y toned, but not, like.
Yeah. Because he knew, like, if you want to do real moonlight, like, it's not bright enough to see anything. Mm-hmm. You have to be a lot brighter. And, like, for a movie that sort of feels dark, it's a very bright movie. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of light. But he likes the single points of light, and he also knew in moonlight you can't really see beyond cyan. Mm-hmm. So he filtered out all reds and yellows.
Yeah.
And it gives the vibe also of the tint of the original black and white, where the night scenes are blue and the day scenes are more sepia. I mean, here the day scenes aren't sepia, but like whenever we're indoors and there's a fire going, it's pretty sepia. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're at the castle. It's the exteriors are the same castle that they filmed Herzog's Nosferatu. It's apparently the castle that likely inspired Bram Stoker's version. I'm gonna have the name of it right here. No, I'm not. Wait, yes, I am. Hunadora Castle. Which is Romanian. Most likely so I think I might be getting some things wrong, because I know that he filmed some stuff in the same castle that Herzog filmed, but I know that Herzog didn't get to film in Romania, so there's some mix and match going on here.
So it also sounds like there's a lot of myth making generally.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's sort of a blessing and a curse that this movie is so recent, and Eggers is so willing to talk about everything that we have everything that he has had to say on it. But I don't know what's true.
Yeah. Maybe he was like speed running the Herzog version in the background and everything,
I do know that the door was artificial. That the exteriors of the castle there were real, but the door was fake because he wanted an older feeling door.
Right.
And that castle is a tourist spot.
Yeah.
But yeah, the door opens on its own. And instead of Orlock kind of walking out and stepping into the camera light for the first time unobstructed, he's off in the distance and he just kind of walks away.
He makes Thomas follow him.
Yeah. And shit gets it. Okay, so we get the sequence, right? It's the sequence we always get, where it's Hutter and Orlock having their first little meeting, and you get all the stuff with the cutting your finger and whatnot, but we also have a little bit of the Coppola, like you get too close to a vampire and the rules of physics don't apply.
Yes.
Except in that one, it felt very objective point of view. Like we are just looking at the world and the world is getting wrong. Here, because we're so aligned to Thomas's point of view, it's not quite clear, and I love this, if the world is wrong or if he's just being like supernaturally drugged.
Well, Orlock is like, when Thomas is like, I'd like to leave. And he's like, you're not well. And it's like saying that made it so. Yeah.
But like in this scene alone, like he goes, he's going up the stairs to follow Orlock, and Orlock kind of vanishes from the stairs and appears at the table. But like at the table also, like suddenly he appears next to him to pour him wine, but then you look over there and he's already sitting down, and like time and space just isn't tracking. And Hutter is so scared throughout the scene.
It's like sweating.
Yeah, his mouth is dropped. And you can tell that he's just sort of paralyzed. Like it's not like the other versions where it's like, I think there's something weird going on here. Yeah. It's sort of like he is fully a fly in a spider's web at this point. Like he's not in control of his motor functions. He might not even remember what's going on, you know, which is so, to me, the stuff in the castle is the scariest stuff in the whole movie. A couple of other moments in the movie are scary to me, but I feel, to me, when you have a limited point of view where you are not privy to a lot and you're only privy to what this one person can tell, and you can tell that they're being manipulated and that they're being stalked, that's always going to be scarier to me than in a group setting where we can kind of bounce around.
Yeah. No, it's very claustrophobic. And, you know, as you mentioned, like the light is coming from one very specific direction.
A lot of candles. Yeah. Big fireplace.
My favorite part of the scene is when Hutter keeps calling Orlock sir, and he does not respond well to this. He insists on being called my lord. You know, as he's like, I insist on being called the respect that's due my ancestors and stuff like that.
My blood demands it.
Yeah, exactly. Which is not in either of the other versions, but is so perfect, like as far as the themes and the society, because part of the reason why Thomas, like apart from this obviously being a very supernatural event, and he's in the room with a literal demon, the rules of society are not working, you know?
Yeah.
Like he is supposed to be able to be very subservient and polite to this man and take care of his needs, but there's none of the like graciousness on the Klaus Kinski, may he rot in hell, like his, you know, like you know, it's all the same between gentlemen, it doesn't matter how much money, you know, like there's no sense at all that Hutter is anything other than like less than a pawn almost.
This is a very different version of Orlock than we have seen in any other version.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Well, he has the long fingies.
He does. There are elements of his design that were very intentionally, you know, harkening back to Max Schreck. Yeah.
And actually that's the most we saw in most of the promos, right? His hands.
Yeah, and like kind of parts of his silhouette, a little bit of the back of his head. But the marketing really kept him away from us. This is Bill Skarsgård, who...
When we were walking back from the movie, I was like, I thought that was Stellan Skarsgård.
You know, he's under a lot of prosthetics.
I mean, he looks old. He does.
Well, he looks ageless. It's actually like he doesn't have...
He looks old and incredibly strong.
He has, you know, dark hair. Like, it's such an interesting... I mean, you know, first of all, Bill Skarsgård vanishes.
Yeah.
Under the prosthetics. And I know that this interpretation has been controversial for some people. It's really grown on me. And part of it might just be because we've had the other versions. But here, like, okay, you have some design elements that, you know, harken back to Shrek. Like, you have the extra knuckle on the fingers. You have the long nails. You have
Shrek, not Shrek the
yes.
Ogre, sorry.
Yeah. You have a little bit of a hunch going on. He has kind of a little bit of the shape to his head and like his nose, and like his ears kind of come to a point a little bit. He, you know, there are some shots where it looks like he kind of has front two fangs, but overall, this kind of goes back to, you know, Eggers's driving principle of design, which is what would it actually look like, and if a folk vampire is just a dead person and not necessarily like a mutant, and this is supposed to be a Transylvanian nobleman from the 15th century. What you have is a somewhat rotting, big guy, very big guy, wearing a lot of furs, big Strimel hat, with a side lock and
a Strimel hat. If you don't know, is the big furry hats you see Hasidic men walking around.
Yeah, this feels like the sort of like military version of that. He's wearing full military regalia.
Yeah.
He's got the mustache. Everybody talks about the mustache. The big
The mustache did not bother me even a little bit. I don't, maybe because I knew it was going to be there, but like, I know people were really thrown by it, and I'm just like, I mean,
it took me a second, just because I'm so used to not seeing that. But like once you're used to it, it's just part of the design.
yeah.
But apparently Transylvanian noblemen would have had that.
It's you know what it is? He's like Stalin as a vampire.
Yeah, he's not the Max Shrek kind of bizarre withering creature that scampers around and hides in the shadows. It's not the Klaus Kinski sad, depressed, kind of faded
Waif.
Yeah. It's not the Gary Oldman, like, sort of a, flamboyant,
Which version? There's 18. Pick one.
But, like, across all of those, he's either, like, flamboyant or he's trying to be suave, you know? Here, it's like, he is a brute. He is a monolith. He's extremely masculine. And he makes demands. You do not make demands of him. If he doesn't want it, Hutter keeps asking him questions, and he just keeps sort of like non-answering them. Or it's like, but what about XYZ? It's like, the contract is signed. By the way, the voice, like Oldman, Bill Skarsgård trained with an opera singer to drop his voice an octave, and here he's doing this sort of like what we do in the shadows, like Nandor, the Relentless, but like on steroids a little bit. So he's got the rolling Transylvanian. It's a fun accent. It's a fun accent to hear. It's a fun accent to do.
Which I know because I have many voice notes from Avishai.
This is NosferaTuesdays, where a horror writer and a scaredy cat. But it's funny. Like, he doesn't. He has a booming voice. While the movie kind of hides him a little bit. He doesn't back down at all. He's just sort of, I'm the presence in the room. You will obey me. You'll do what I say.
There's no seduction.
There is no seduction. It's kind of almost like, it's a weird metaphor, but it feels a little bit like a trashy romance novel of like the guy who just comes and takes what he wants.
Yeah.
Like, sweep me out from under my feet. But like, as monstrous as that would actually be.
Well, I mean, I think that, we'll get to it, but like when, like the blood that is, when people are sucked from in this movie, it's from their chest, which means that when Orlock is lying on top of them, it looks inherently like a rape. Yeah. Which is not that, you can definitely pose neck biting that way too, but like, there's kind of no other way to do it here. Yeah,
and apparently that's also
like the scene in Buffy where she's like, "Drink from me, it's okay." Like, you can't, couldn't do that if he was doing it from her chest,
Yeah, and apparently that's folklore too. That it would be on the chest, and it's all it. And no
mosquito bites.
No mosquito bites. I mean, so like, obviously we're doing the whole bouncing back and forth to Ellen as we normally do. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I just noticed the clock.
Yeah.
But.
Well, we laid down a lot of the themes.
Yeah, but like we bounce back and forth a bit, Ellen with the Hardings, back at the cemetery beach. But we also have just Thomas is having the worst time of any Thomas that we have ever seen, except for maybe Keanu Reeves. And even him, you can kind of be like, oh no, the brides, please don't. but like here, it's like,
well, they do bite off his penis, so
probably, yeah. But here, like. If prior Thomases / Jonathans have awakened in their chair, like this Thomas is ragdoll on the floor, and like when this Orlock like sees him cut his finger, he's not like, oh please allow me. He's like, I'm gonna take care of that. Sit there, I'm coming. Yeah. Like here, like he wakes up, he's in a flop sweat. He can't really remember what's going on. He has like a leech mark on his chest, and he still has to do business. Like like that night, like they still have to sign the contracts.
It's totally a contract for the house. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's not a divorce contract at all.
No.
In a language that he can't read. Like, I'm just like, you're a lawyer. You should know. Don't sign a contract you're not going to read. Oh my god.
But again, that's so fairy tale. Yeah. Like you almost feel like it's not in a language, you know.
It's Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and the fact that what he gets in return is a
sack
purse,
of coin.
Yeah. It's so like beautiful in that way.
Yeah. But Thomas is like, he's just getting roofied right and left in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, first by the potentially friendly locals, and now just by, like, he's just sort of like, I'm not feeling good. I want to leave. He's like, it's like, no. It's like, I want to, no, I think I'm going to go. It's like, no.
Yeah.
like, don't. Like, this isn't a request. You are saying, I am your king.
Yeah.
It's very warlordish, but like,
yeah.
But Orlock has taken the locket.
Yeah.
Which is dangles from the waist in this movie as opposed to from the neck.
And does it have a portrait or just her hair in it?
It's got both.
Okay. It's
got both. But she very pointedly, like, there's a scene in this movie where she makes a very concerted decision to like give the lock of hair, which I'm still like sort of wondering what sort of the intention is of that.
Yeah. Well, you know, because and this is maybe one of the parts where it doesn't quite add up, because then that kind of puts into question, like, she does not want Thomas to go to this place, right?
Yeah.
But that's also probably because she has some inkling that it has something to do with the demon that she, you know, had sex with when she was a younger child.
Well, it's funny because, like, she kind of does and doesn't remember, like, as we'll kind of get to, like, she kind of does and doesn't remember what those experiences were. Like she mentions later that like those memories have kind of flown out of her head. But we also know that she's not totally in control of herself.
Right.
And, you know, Eggers leans on the whole, like, sleepwalkers at the time were believed to be connected to another realm. So, like, she's just... So in that scene, she might have been a little hypnotized. I know that Eggers has said that when Thomas first shows up at the castle and does a little bow, that's him being hypnotized, that he's not actually intentionally doing a bow. It's like, the movie's just full of that, because Orlock in this isn't just a vampire; he's also a warlock.
Yeah,
right. Like kind of like textually, like you know,
Orlock the warlock.
Orlock the warlock. Like he's like, we are told later on by the local nuns that this is a guy who dabbled in the occult and made compact with the devil, and like. Whereas in the prior versions, I have felt that kind of like the shadow is just sort of like an extension of just his existence. Like to be a vampire is to have shadows that just do weird fucking things. Here, they always feel a little bit like a spell that he is casting. And sometimes he even says a spell to do it. Like this is a vampire that has learned magic. Yeah. Like this isn't like vampires are magic. This vampire has learned magic.
Yeah.
But... yeah, Thomas is just having a bad time.
He is having such a bad time. And Ellen is having a pretty bad time, too. Like, continually worse.
Yeah, well, she, you know...
Oh, one thing we should say. No skull clock. The fuck?
No skull clock. But we do have Thomas, wandering around during the day, finding the
classic scene.
Yeah, because he's got all these bites of this chest.
The classic scene, this time with extra penis.
Yeah, well... he finds the popcorn bucket. And, you know, and Eggers also talked about, like, why he did it this way, too. That, like, he said, like, in the Shrek version, the Back-Shrek version, people at the time were probably, like, repulsed by what they saw there. That wouldn't really repulse us now. So it's like, okay, he is fully naked and rotting and covered in maggots in the dirt. And I gotta say, like, my first thought looking at him is like, oh, he's got a Frankenstein build.
Yeah.
Like, he looks like he's a big muscular guy that looks kind of like...
I actually think you could probably write a whole dissertation on like the weight versus the strongman.
Yeah,
Nosferatu.
Big dick energy.
Yeah, literally.
But he looks like a Frankenstein monster. He's there in his coffin, covered in maggots, and Hutter makes a smart choice because he remembers what to do with vampires.
Yep, it doesn't work though.
He picks up a pickaxe. And, Orlock stands up, he hangs Orcock, and I apologize for having said that. God.
That's gonna be the subside.
We're getting nasty in here. But, God, that and IMAX.
Oh my God.
The biggest vampire penis I've ever seen in my life. But also just part of his character of like even if he wasn't a vampire, he would probably do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's all posturing.
Right, because and it is tied to, I mean, again, accurate or not, this is our perception of the past. Somebody like this would not have regard for people around him.
Yeah, this is the Andrew Tate Orlock going after the poor beta male. Tom Sutter. I bet there's a reading. I don't know. I mean, like, it does. I mean, this movie has a lot of rape going on, like textually and subtextually. Mm-hmm. Like when Orlock chases Thomas through the castle, like he is simultaneously, commanding Ellen into her sleepwalk. We have that beautiful cross cutting between the Ellen sleepwalk and, just Orlock just like hunting down Thomas in the castle and hypnotizing him to open that door. And Orlock gets in there and chomps down on his chest. And we get this shot where, like, because this happens on the bed, right? Where, like, while they're doing that, like, Thomas kind of starts to pass out, kind of feels like ecstasy a little bit. And the two of them lift off the ground like they're levitating. It feels like it's a very similar shot to what happens a bunch in the Babadook. If anyone's seen the Babadook, but like it feels like this mix of pain and pleasure, kind of like it's such a specific choice to have made there that this is a sexual thing that he is doing to Thomas. But that was not lost on audiences.
Yeah, no. I mean yeah. I think part of what this movie is about is like the idea, this is going to sound weird, especially with certain things that have been in the news lately, but like, I think there is a world in which part of what this movie is about is that there is a pleasure in being dominated, but that it's not that simple.
Yeah, well, I mean, and like obviously like this subtext is barely text. Like we get a big wide shot of a naked Orlock, sucking Thomas dry. like it's not, it's not subtle, but there's the, I have a book of essays by Robin Wood, which, if I've talked about it on the podcast before, forgive me.
You may have.
I may have. I'm going to say it again because it's super pertinent here. Horror, according to Robin Wood, is about the return of the repressed. That whatever it is we are repressing, that thing that naturally is part of us, or it's something that we want, or it's something that we feel, but we're scared of it. We push it down. Horror is about, in his view, it's about that thing bursting through like 1,000 times fold to destroy us. And this movie feels very Return of the Repressed. Like Ellen has, she has wants, and she is scared of those wants in a society where you're not supposed to have those wants. And this is a movie about that thing being the thing that she is afraid of the most, bursting forth and just destroying everything, right? And for Thomas, like the thing that he is afraid of is being inadequate. And this is a movie in which at every single turn he is made ineffectual, and it's really kind of not his fault. Like he's doing his best.
Yeah, no, it is.
But it's just the fear of being of not being man enough, really. And the poor boy is roofied and raped. Yeah. And rendered useless by everything that happens in this movie.
Up to the end.
Up to the end. So it's, if only Robin Wood were alive today.
But I think that's why, like, all of the, like, purient stuff in this movie, all of the, like, it's like Nosferatu 1922, but with sex. Like, I hear those arguments, but I think that it's very conscious and very intentional. Like I don't think it's like, let's just update it to make it sexy for 2025. I think that it's going back to the real ideas and themes of the 1922 and of Dracula, but just presenting it in a different way. Like I actually personally I feel like this movie is like way less sexy or horny or whatever than the than 92.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, like, I think
sex in this movie is almost always scary in some way.
Yeah. No, I feel like the 1992 one, and I'm sure legions of fans will disagree with me, I feel like it has the sort of the horniness of an immature person.
Interesting.
Like, it feels like, and I kind of got the sense that it was sort of like, reaching for the taboo thing because that's, like, exciting and I'm sure people are going to disagree with that. It's just sort of the vibe that I got. Like, it felt gazy in a sort of like teenager way to me.
Well, the werewolf scene is extremely.
Oh, absolutely. But also the sheer amount of time we spend with those brides. Like, Like, I don't know. Whereas here, it really is all thematic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything that is happening in this is thematic. And that's why it sort of bristles me whenever I see somebody being like, oh, Eggers didn't bring anything new to this adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, he just updated it on a technical standpoint, but it's otherwise, it's like, no, I feel like this has a whole point of view.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So when Thomas escapes, I think we should just say that. It's very disappointing because he does not use a bedsheet rope.
Yeah, I was sad about this.
This movie sucks. There's no bedsheet rope. I'm done. Podcast over.
He actually,
Why was there no bedsheet rope legit though?
He's, just to recap, Thomas Hutter, roofied by Romani vampire hunters, roofied throughout his stagecoach.
Maybe for his own good, possibly.
Roofied by a phantom carriage. Roofied and raped night after night by a big old vampire dude.
Corpse.
Just a giant man.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he's like left for dead on this, this bed looked kind of cozy. I like this bed. The whole castle feels dusty, but this bed is kind of cozy. It's like left for dead, and now he has to wake up, and now he's being chased by wolves. Yeah. And they used actual wolves apparently.
Oh.
And then he jumps, and then he has to climb out the window, and then he just plummets into a river. This guy's having the worst time of any Thomas we've ever seen, except for maybe Keanu Reeves, and that's debatable. And also, Keanu Reeves also falls out the window the same, except that he falls sideways.
Right, he falls sideways because
physics.
Physics. Yeah.
But it's actually amazing that he's alive.
It is true. He has a lot of grit in him.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
By the way, love the sets. Love the costumes. I love the prosthetics. I feel like this doesn't get enough discussion because everybody's focused on like, oh, he's like a dead dude with a mustache. Everybody talks about the mustache. But like full body prosthetic for all of these nude scenes that just fully looks like a creature.
Yeah.
And it's, Bill Skarsgård, he's Pennywise from the It movies. And apparently he, over the course of this movie's long development, he was gonna be in this as Thomas originally, and then that fell through. And then he was gonna be in The Northman as a side character, and then that fell through. And then, after the role of Thomas was taken, it's like, but I really want to be in this movie. What can I do? And it's like, can I be Friedrich? It's like, no, that's been taken. It's like, oh. It's like, do you want to be Orlock? Because apparently he had sent a letter being like, I just really want to be in this movie. And Eggers was like, I don't know what to...
He didn't email
He didn't reply.
And now all of my unanswered industry emails will be in the pre-Nosferatu stage.
Oh, yeah.
Pre-Orlock.
But then Eggers watched It Chapter 2, and there's a scene in that in which he's not playing full clown. He's playing someone who seems a lot more human. It's sort of an iteration of the clown that happens. And, I gotta say, I like It Chapter 1 quite a lot. I really don't like Chapter 2. That's a me thing. I'm glad we got this out of it because that was the thing that convinced Eggers, like, oh, he can do it. And Skarsgård, bless him, has to wear like 60 pieces of prosthetic in this movie. It's like an hours-long process. He then has to like do Mongolian throat singing and wear furs. Yeah. Like that must have been, it's not his first rodeo, but that must have been unpleasant.
Yeah. He's kind of low-key making himself into like the practical Andy Serkis,
Yeah, or Lon Chaney, like the man of a thousand faces. Yeah. It's according to IMDb trivia, apparently he's the youngest person to play Dracula, which feels like bullshit to me, but like, I'll take it.
I don't know. I think that whoever played Dracula in Robert Eggers' stage version of Nosferatu was younger than Bill Skarsgård.
And you know who that was?
That was Eggers. Right?
That was Eggers.
Yeah, of course it was.
But yeah, no, it's and it here's a really interesting thing that it's a specific choice, right? Because like they're making him this sort of ageless guy who like feels super ancient, but also he has full color in his hair and vitality and all that. His eyes are unclouded for the most part. Mm-hmm. Like when he's casting spells, he has clouded eyes, but like they didn't do anything to his, as far as I can tell, they didn't do anything to his pupils or to his irises. They don't give him monster eyes. They don't do. It's very lucid. Mm-hmm. And that's the part. That's the window to the soul, so to speak. Like that's the part where I kind of feel like, okay, there's like the human behind the monster there. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting choice.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. While we're talking about performances, I do want to, like, I'm very cynical about people like Lily Rose Depp because it's such an obvious nepo baby situation that she's even in a position to get roles like this, to lead a movie like this. But I have to say, like, I was really impressed. Just even on like a body control level, like it's very, very impressive what she managed to do here. It seems like this was a very physically demanding movie for most of the cast. And like, I appreciate that, because sometimes it feels like actors kind of get all the credit while like they're just sitting there like repeating things, and like the people behind the scenes are the ones who are sweating and getting wet and whatever.
Yeah.
But it looks like everyone kind of really, earned their stripes to one degree or other.
Yeah, she's great. She's at an 11 the entire movie.
She is, yeah.
She's we never get to see like normal happy.
Yeah. She's never just grabbing like coffee with a friend.
Like at best, she is yearning and talking about how she feels a presence coming upon her.
Yeah, which is funny because like if you think about it, 1922's Ellen is like the chillest by far, by like many miles.
Yeah, and apparently a big reason why Lily Rose Depp got Eggers' attention, when they were having their conversation. Like, oh, I want you to audition, was she brought up Isabella Gianni of, Herzog Nosferatu fame, but in the possession context, that kind of just full on, we go to 11 and we don't come back down kind of batshit. And apparently Eggers was like, okay, I want you to rehearse for this. I want you to win, but, a lot of people to impress here. So here's your homework I want you to do. Here are the movies I want you to watch. And then the two scenes that she had to audition with, one of them is the early scene where she's describing her nightmare to Thomas, which I don't think we mentioned.
No, because I feel like that was in the trailer so often it almost...
Yeah, and of course it's the version that we have in every single one of these movies of like, I feel like something bad's going to happen. Except here it's like, I feel like something bad's going to happen that I'm going to like.
Yeah, and also I married death already. Like...
Yeah, it's like I was at our wedding and everyone was dead and death was there and I danced with death. And it was amazing. I had a great time. I don't like this feeling in me.
I'm so happy.
I don't like that I'm repressing this thing about me. That repression might return. But that was one of the two scenes that she had to audition with. And another one is another just important monologue that we'll get to. But she commits. Everybody in this commits. It's really good. I'm actually kind of sad that they gave the prosthetic penis to Hoult and not to Skarsgård. I feel like Skarsgård deserved to keep that.
Yeah, but it could be like a Gimli situation where it's like, I never want to see this fucking thing again. We always bring back Lord of the Rings. I love it.
Well, Skarsgård has said in interviews he never wants to play anything as evil as this ever again.
Yeah, fair. I bet he will though.
He will.
Yeah.
A lot. This isn't even his first vampire. He was on Hemlock Grove.
Oh. Cool. Okay, so back in Germany.
Or Victorian England.
That has canals also. So Ellen is having sleepwalking and seizures, and we meet Dr. Sievers.
Played by
amazing
Ralph Ineson.
Amazing.
Yeah, played by Ralph Ineson. He's always so fucking good. Even in the bad things that he's in, he's so good. It's just his voice.
Yeah.
But like, Ellen normally has her sleepwalking and her nightmares and whatnot, but here she's in full like The Exorcist like possession mode, and so Sievers is like, oh, she has a congestion of the blood. Tie her corset tighter. Tie her to the bed sometimes. Like. It's telling this to Friedrich, who is just increasingly unhappy that he's like taking care of
this crazy lady.
Yeah, and then she starts to say on the bed like, "Oh, he's coming," and Steve's like, "Ugh, more ether for you," which I know you have a lot to say on this subject.
Yeah. So to start with the corset, I think it's really interesting because, well, first of all, back on the costume design side, her corset is designed as a self-tying corset. Which was made for ladies who didn't have maids to tie their corsets.
Because she's poor.
Exactly, which is a fantastic detail, and I absolutely love it. It also is more windy, and it looks more constricting, even though it's the same. Another thing about corsets, and I'll speak in their defense briefly, we have this very modern perspective that, like, all corsets were, like, extremely restrictive and painful and meant to, like, destroy your innards and whatever, when they were really more just like bras. Like you had to wear them to like make your clothes fit, and you know, people found them comfortable or uncomfortable as they did. You know, I think personally the modern historical costuming community has like gone a little too far as like corsets are the most comfortable things in the world. Like you'd be so lucky to wear one. But I think there is a happy medium where this is not inherently an instrument of restriction. What it is, though, is an instrument of foundation, right? And it's the foundations of society, because your clothes only go over this, like they only fit in that period way if you're wearing these undergarments, you know? And like, to me, that's so important to like the theme of the movie being like the real villain of the movie being society, you know? And I also think that ties in with Sievers, actually, because Sievers is so easily poised to be like just the traditional, like, oh, the hysterical woman, like tie her to the bed, you know, whatever, which he does. But he also changes, right? Like when he calls Von Franz and Von Franz arrives and Von Franz is like, this is not what's going on. Here's all my proof that these are actually vampires. He's like, oh, you're right. Switch tactics, go that way. You know, which is, I feel like, a flexibility that sort of character doesn't usually have. And that we can talk about more in, you know, 7 hours or so. But like, I think ties into like the duality that a lot of these movies have been dealing with about whether science or religion is kind of the villain or the savior, you know? And I think it's really neither in this movie. And we can get more into that later, but I think Sievers as a repentant character, or like at least somebody who can change, is a really important part of that.
Yeah, you know, just to touch briefly on the science versus religion thing. You know, in Eggers' films, it's sort of a moot point. It's just kind of what is believed at the time. That's just the rules of the world. Like there isn't sort of a sense of different camps. Although here we have a little bit of that with Friedrich, but. To the corset, you know, so Sievers, when he's, you know, prescribing the corset, he says it's to fix her posture, to help with the blood regulation, all that. You know who else is wearing a corset? Friedrich.
Oh, interesting.
I was reading an interview about this, that like men at the time would have worn corsets too, and it affects their posture, and that's why he's standing so uptight and upright the whole time. And it also kind of, I mean, just kind of looking at your metaphor for it, it also kind of puts him in the same sort of foundation, you know, like he is set up to walk a certain way in life and sit down a certain way in life. You know, like this is. I
mean, one of the first things Thomas says is like, you've taken your father's place.
Yeah. And, you know, it's, you know, this comes back to his performance, right? This very sort of over the top, just way of handling himself, and that's in the clothing too. Like he can't really lounge,
right? They
wouldn't have lounged, and this helps prevent that, you know. And it's interesting what you say also about the flexibility, because I think that there could be something to be said about this movie as commenting on rape culture, right? Because it's one thing to be like, there are bad people in this world who commit rapes, right? And there's the villains, and there's nothing to kind of say like, societally, there is a rape culture problem, right? There are things that are just too permitted societally, or just not noticed, or, you know, like, or, you know, or leaned towards even. And to kind of suggest that one could change from that, you know, if you learn, you're repositioned. This movie seems to have a bit of that, you know. There's an evolution in this movie towards believing women, you know, for example, you know, and towards, you know, accepting PTSD even. Like there's a lot of that comes up, but it's, God, the people who said that this movie adds nothing. I don't get it.
I don't know. It's so thematic.
I don't get
it so much.
It's so there.
Oh.
It's all there.
We forgot to talk about, by the way, Naked Knock.
Yeah, well, we could talk about him now, right? Because we're about to meet Knock again.
Yeah. Well, we went, as far as Knock is concerned, we went straight from like me being like, oh, this is like a normal version of Knock. That's cool. And then he's like naked and cackling on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that this movie in some ways kind of removes some of the like expository details that we would otherwise get from these Nosferatu movies.
Right.
Like,
I wasn't sure who it was at first because it's,
right.
we only met him once and now he's naked, so it's harder to tell.
But like in other Nosferatus, we see like, Orlock loads his casket onto a raft and gets the raft to a boat, and they check the manifest of the boat and they load and like all of that's kind of skipped over because like you don't really need that. Mm-hmm. But we also have things that are filled in, like what is Nock's deal, right? At what point did Nock fall in with Orlock? Mm-hmm. And we don't really have that in the original movie. We have it here of like pretty quickly out the gate. It's like, I am fully subservient to the devil. I have a pentagram on my floor. I am doing a naked ritual with my own blood, surrounded by candles, writing out a contract in like some, mystical language. And I'm calling out and saying, I have arranged it so that you can come for your goal, the thing that you are chasing, your obsession, the object of your obsession. And by the way, there's it answers a lot of plot things, and I think this is what people maybe are talking about when they say this movie feels more grounded and less dreamlike. Mm-hmm. This movie has a why now, typically.
I do not know what those noises are if they are coming through the mic, but
it's just the heating pipes in my building.
Oh well.
But like typically, it's like, why is Dracula after hundreds of years moving to Inglermany? Inglermany. It's typically just like, now's the time to do this. Mm-hmm. And just poor unlucky Thomas and poor unlucky Ellen. And here it's like, no, if not for Ellen, he wouldn't have awakened. And if not for the marriage of Ellen and Thomas, he wouldn't have been like, that's it, I'm moving there. Mm-hmm. And so it's all a scheme, right? Like, this is why I have the question of who the protagonist is, because I know who the hero is, and I know who thinks he's the protagonist,
right?
But the inciting incident you could tell the story from Orlock's perspective. The inciting incident happens to him. It's like I've been awakened, and now she's married. Mm-hmm. I got to do something about this.
Right.
I'm gonna hire a dude.
Like, go on demonic LinkedIn and just
whatever service is used in Scott Pilgrim to arrange the evil exes. You know how long it took me? 12 hours. But like, yeah. So Nock in this a little bit less like there is a certain sympathy to him, but he's a little bit less sympathetic. Mm-hmm. A little scarier, but we meet him again now. We
do. He is in the madhouse in Seaver's facility or whatever.
Which, by the way, Seavers is like, he says to his underling, like, I told you not to use the prison cells anymore. We don't do that anymore.
Right, which I think is really thematically important. Yeah.
Seavers is a good guy.
Exactly.
He just has bad information.
Yeah, exactly. And when he gets better information, he kind of adjusts, which I appreciate. Yeah. So, where are we?
Nock is in this prison cell, which looks like the one in the original movie with the scratchings all over the walls. Mm-hmm. And Nock looks a lot like the actor in the original, just with less fake hair.
Yeah.
Nock is there doing the Renfield thing of eating little animals. Yeah. It's lives. He sends me lives. Super Renfield, super Dracula, super Tom Waits. He picks up a pigeon.
Thankfully, the kittens are left out of this.
Yeah, the kittens are fine. But he picks up a pigeon and bites its head off. Mm-hmm. And Seaver says, my good man, why would you do that? Which is such a flex. Everybody always laughs at that line.
We're bringing you food.
But also, like, respect. It's like, I'm not scared of you, dude. Let's just figure this out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Reasonable minds can agree.
But then Nock does try to kill him.
Yes. He also later kills the orderly, I think.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
The orderly he seemed very deliberately patterned off the 1931, like,
he's got the cockney.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like he was eating them raw, raw like. But yeah, no, this Nock's a little bit scary, a little bit more demonic, a little bit more like, yes, I have made weird compact with the devil, a little bit less, the poor sad scapegoat. Mm-hmm. there is an element of victimness to him, but it's kind of on him.
Yeah.
You know, he signed up for this.
Yeah. Thomas couldn't read the contract. It seems like Knock could have.
Yeah, well, he has a codex, which we'll find out later.
Right.
But Severs is like, we gotta call in the experts here. I have a guy.
Albin Eberhard von Franz.
Yeah, he has Friedrich go with him too. Mr.
And he's a Paracelsian.
The Paracelsian, yes. Although he is not named Dr. Bulwer in this. Yeah. He is named Albin Eberhard von Franz, named after Albin Grau.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Patterned after Jung, apparently. Like kicked out for his eccentricities.
Oh, interesting.
But when we meet him, Friedrich is taken by Severs to von Franz's home. It's Willem Dafoe.
One tiny thing. In this scene, when Severs is pitching von Franz to Friedrich says like, "Oh well, I'll spare no expense," and I think that's important on several levels because it is like he does want to help in his way, but also he views it as something that you can cure with money.
Yeah, because that's how it works,
Isn't that
right?
How it works? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like he's like the shipyard master. It's like there's a problem. Just buy a new boat. Your kids are unhappy. Buy them a dollhouse. Man, Anna at one point during Ellen's convulsions is like she needs her husband. But we meet von Franz, and he is Willem Dafoe, who this time is Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. He is also only slightly less funny than he is in Shadow of the Vampire.
Yeah, well, because he is Willem Dafoe, age 70-something, just still fully going for it. And God bless him, he's got another 50 years in him.
Yep.
But I will say, I found, so this is my little Nosferatu digression, because I noticed it the second time around. I didn't really notice it the first time, but we meet von Franz. And Friedrich's totally not sold, but Severs has worked with him. He knows what he's going through. Von Franz is doing a ritual that involves sitting in place and muttering to oneself, and he's trying to do alchemy, and he's very focused. In Judaism we call that kavana, and he's not really willing to engage with them or even kind of recognize that they're there until Severs kind of knows how this goes. Basically, goes to him and says a prayer. And then von Franz, with his eyes closed and still muttering, responds with a response prayer. And then he opens his eyes Severs, my good boy. And it feels like he's just like you can't talk to him while he's davening. And there's this ritual space in the kind of, in the language of, what's her
Enochian?
name? No. In the language of Amanda Montell's book, Cultish, it's ritual space.
Oh, I need to read that.
Ritual time, rather, where it's this is the time I've set apart for my, my specific ritual that starts and ends with, with a mantra or something.
I'm like, why don't I remember this? And then I'm like, that's when I went to the bathroom.
Yeah, this is when you stepped out.
Yeah.
So he's sitting there, he's describing, he's muttering to himself, he's saying I can't turn this coal to gold tonight. The stars are wrong. Blah, blah, blah. He has his eyes closed. And then Stevens goes in, says a thing. Von Franz all but responds Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Vaed. Opens his eyes and says, you're here! It's here! It's like now that you're done. And that I don't know, that struck me as very Jewish.
Oh, interesting.
I don't think it was intentionally as such, but it felt like it to me.
Interesting.
And also in the sense that the movie treats that not with any sort of scorn or derision, or it's just sort of this is his world that we're now entering. This is what he does. He understands it. Severs respects it. And it's neither here nor there whether in this universe alchemy works.
Right.
He also wears a little kippah, which is...
That's true.
But yeah, he looks up at Friedrich and says let me guess. There's an acquaintance of yours, a woman who is having fits of somnambulism. You look tired, man. Oh, yeah.
And of course it would be a woman.
Of course it would be. And poor Friedrich, he feels so put upon. It's like everybody borrows money from me and drops their crazy ladies off with me.
A perfect life.
I can't sleep these days, and I can't complain about it. I'm not allowed to complain about it.
But yeah, at a certain point, also, Orlock's ship does arrive, and as does Thomas.
Before that,
Oh, okay.
rewind a tiny bit. We get a scene that feels very like this movie's version of the Van Helsing like hypnotism scene from the 1992's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula on Ice, where he's like, I want to prove to you that magic things can happen. I've explained it to you, but now I'm going to do a magic thing to you right now. And here, Ellen is, you know, she's going through her shit. And he's like, oh, she's having second sight right now. She can't see, like her pupils aren't moving. And he just impales her arm on a needle.
Yes.
And that's like his way of proving like she can't feel anything. And I must have missed this the first time I saw it.
You did, because that was when you went to the bathroom.
I was in the bathroom. And I came back, I'm like, oh my God. I was like squirming so much in my seat. But I love that everybody looks at that and is like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's also... Like, I think this movie is a little bit ambiguous about, like, von Franz as, like, a hero character, capital H.
Yeah.
Because he also, you know, this scene is a very clear, like, example of how he is willing to use Ellen, even, like, her physical body, you know, like, to a certain extent, he claims ownership over it, too, you know? Yeah.
Although, when he first sees her in bed, his first thing is, like, untie this child! You know, they untie her from the bed, and he hears out her story about how when she was young, she was weird, and it was weird to her father, and, you know, she had all these convulsions in the woods, and she, you know, conveniently leaves out the Orlock thing, and it's unclear if she remembers or not. But he's very listening, and he has a line later in the movie of, like, I'm but a tourist in this world.
And you live here, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think he's a very complicated character, but yeah. I thought that was noteworthy in that, like, you have, at this point, like, the room is crowded with men who think that they can, like, control Ellen.
Yeah.
You know, and then, and obviously you have Orlock incoming and Thomas coming back. And, like, there is a certain degree to which, like, yeah, I don't know. I just felt like he could have pinched her. Like, it's an extremely vivid, you know, like, that's gotta hurt when she wakes up, right? Surely.
Yeah, in theory. I mean, I'm curious now. I'm sort of going to, like, pitch an alternate version of, like, you would lose Willem Dafoe if you did this, you know, in this role, and it might also just be a little on the nose. But I'm reminded of how the BBC miniseries Dracula recasts Van Helsing as a woman.
Oh, interesting.
And as a nun, actually, like a nun scientist. And I'm wondering what this movie would have been like if their weirdo outcast expert on this matter was a woman. Just because having the woman come in and say, like, you guys can't understand what's going on, but I do. It might have been a little on the nose, might have been a little, like, the symbolism's on the wall, but it could have been really interesting, too.
I feel like it would, Eggers would dislike the potential ahistoriosity of it.
Right, I mean, that's why you'd probably have to recast it as somebody who, you know, like maybe couldn't get a medical degree, you know, or you know, like, look into who the, like,
the wise women.
Yeah, who the witches of the time would have been.
The nuns in the you know, that Thomas stays with, like, play that role a little bit. Like, they know what's up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Thomas is rescued by Romanian nuns who explain to him, "You met a vampire who also knows magic. You are cursed." By the way, okay, I love, you know, it's one big difference between the Herzog version's relationship to the original and this one's relationship to the original is the Herzog one is, I'm going to restage this, right? And here it's like the original was trying to be scary for its time, so we have to be scary for our time, and so we have all these sort of leveling ups, right? Yes. Like, it's not enough for Thomas to discover the coffin; he has to then be chased around the castle by, you know, a big fucking monster. It's not enough for Thomas to escape out the window with a bedsheet; he has to fall out being chased by wolves. It's not enough for him to be kind of, like, taken care of by some nuns in an inn. They have to do an exorcism on him. You know, like, it's very it's very modern horror in this sort of classical style.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, just a side note, like another big difference I've noticed between the motivations for doing this movie versus Herzog's.
Mm-hmm.
Herzog wanted to, you know, he was drawn to the connection of, you know, German cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this was the great German cinema of its time. I want to make the great German cinema of our time.
Mm-hmm.
In conversation with that. And here it's like, this is a period piece. I want to connect to the history.
Mm-hmm.
The history that's being depicted as opposed to the history of the object itself.
Right.
Which is interesting.
It is interesting. But I think, well, going back to the nuns for a sec.
We can go back to the nuns fully.
I mean, this is, I think, the only part of the story that, like, in which, I guess, religion poses itself as a real potential opposite and protective force. Because, like, they're like, if you leave, you know, he can't touch you here. But if you leave, you're screwed. And, of course, he leaves anyway.
Yeah.
But, like, even, you know, the cross that, like, Anna gives to Ellen, you know, that is almost more symbolic of their friendship than of, like... Yeah.
And as we'll see, it's totally useless.
Right, exactly.
But Thomas is in a frenzy. It's like, he's going for my wife. He's going for my wife. He has the locket. I have to go after it.
I gave him to her. I signed the paper.
I sold her to him for a peanut. And he gets on a horse. And I got to say, by the way, like, the colors of this movie are so deliberately muted. Mm-hmm. It's very color control, you know, at like, yes, we have access to color, but we're going to decide where to deploy it, which I think is, you know, mark of an artist, you know, it's all intention. There's a shot of the exterior of this church where it's like, if not for the fact that there's like snow kind of covering it, that's a really colorful church. Like, it's like, you know, it's like a tile, you know, it's almost rainbow. It's like the most colorful thing in the movie. Which I'm like, they must have built for this, but like, it's such an interesting, it's like, I guess that's what such churches would be.
I guess, yeah.
But yeah, no, he's like, I'm going to ride home, even though I'm still kind of vampiric.
I was really curious about whether we would get the Herzog version from here.
Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised that this version of Thomas never turns. Mm-hmm. He does occasionally say, like, I feel a little in his thrall, but like, that doesn't really...
Well, he also at one point, like, throws her off of him.
Right. Well, we can get to that because I feel like I have a really specific read on that.
Okay, tell me.
Well, we'll get to it.
Okay.
Because you know, it's all a race for who's going to get to Ellen first. And you have Thomas on the horse, and you have Orlock on the boat. Mm-hmm. And Orlock is psychically communicating to Ellen from the boat as she's sleepwalking around. And we don't get a name of the boat.
Damn it. Was I correct in that the boat belongs to Friedrich? I'm
not 100% sure it belongs to Friedrich as much as he's in charge of the shipyard.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's possible.
I don't know. I feel like it belongs to him in the sense that all boats in that harbor will belong to him. Mm-hmm. Like, he's in charge.
Right. So it's really like, I mean, regardless of...
Like, it's political.
Right. Whether or not he is like the economic agent of his own destruction, this comes into his house, literally.
Yeah. And we get like a really modern cinematic take on, you know, the destruction of this boat. Like, we're seeing people dying from the plague and vomiting up blood. And instead of getting that sort of very familiar Orlock rising out of the, you know, the casket, like, you know, straight as a bolt, and doing his little dance on the deck that we're looking up from below and getting all of these sort of innuendos of what's going on and people lashing themselves to the wheel and whatnot. We get the scene that is like one for me, like one of the most effective and also just sort of normal to a degree, like horror scenes in the movie. Like, it feels like I could see this in other horror movies, where you have like a guy is going down into the hold to kill whatever's doing this, and he sees the box up ahead, but it's dark in there, and he's like walking slowly, and the only light is the light that he's bringing with it, and he's walking closer to this casket. And we see something moving behind him, which is very Alien. You know, it's like, oh, the alien is kind of blending into the walls, and we kind of notice, but they don't. Mm-hmm. And he gets to the box, and he opens it up, and we tilt down, and it's just full of rats. And we tilt back up, and Orlock's right behind him, and rips his throat out. And it's super effective. It's also like the first like big moment in the movie where I'm like, he is a movie monster. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not just a take on vampire, take on this character. he's a creature.
Right.
You know, like a creature effect.
Right.
And it's also, you know, it's a big jump scare.
Interesting.
You know, like we're not doing the sort of like he's astral projecting his image on top of the box. You know,
Right.
like normally that's all the boat stuff has been played for spooks, and here it's played for visceral horror, which is fascinating, especially since the boat, instead of kind of pulling up to shore like in both
crashes. Like,
yeah. And that's what Murnau wanted to do, but couldn't afford it.
Oh.
So,
that's what it does in The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Yeah, but we do a Coppola. We're intercutting this with Crazy Renfield.
Yeah.
he's in his box, and he's like, he's coming. Ellen's having her fits. Von Franz says one of my favorite lines in the movie.
Is this the one we've been memeing?
I think he does say that in the scene, but maybe in an earlier scene, he says one of my favorite lines where they're like he's like, don't tie her up, no more ether, and they're like, but she'll rave all night. He says, then rave she must. But yeah, no, I think this is the scene where he says,
we've been blinded by the gaseous light of science.
I have seen things that would make Isaac Newton crawl into his mother's womb.
I hate that line. That is a bad line.
It always gets a laugh.
He delivers it so well, and like the character is just crazy enough for it to work, but like it's not a good line.
I have wrestled with the devil as Isaac has wrestled with angels, which, by the way, like he later admits he's never dealt with this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but yeah, no, it's Willem Dafoe is having a lot of fun. He's the Van Helsing of this movie, and he finds this very interesting middle ground between the versions of Van Helsings that we've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is definitely not the useless version. I mean, explicitly not the useless version, the useless scientist from Herzog. But at the same time, he's not really the, crucifix gunslinging, guy from the 1931 version either. I almost feel like the important thing here is like not necessarily credulity in any particular thing, but credulity as a fact of itself.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly not the hero.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think unlike a bunch of other characters in this story, he doesn't think he's the hero.
Right, yes.
Which is big for Van Helsing.
Yes.
He's a tourist. He calls himself a tourist. I think archetypically he'd be the mentor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But
I've not asked Jung.
Yeah, he's here to help, but he knows that he's an outsider, and it's kind of refreshing.
Yeah. But
yeah, no, the boat done crash.
Flag done come.
Friedrich's the first to hear because it's his dock. We done get the rats.
So many rats.
They used a lot of real rats. Shades of Herzog, but hopefully no stories of cruelty come to light.
I think they said that the first couple rows of rats were real rats, and then they CGI'd.
Yeah, but they still said they had thousands of rats.
Yeah.
But there's a shot in this movie that I love with Knock, where he's fallen sideways in his chair, and the poor attendant, the asylum attendant goes to help him out, and is bending over and he's muttering something, and then as we push in, suddenly the camera rotates 90 degrees so that Knock is right side up. It's aha, he's only pretending. He is fully in control. And I just love that as a camera move.
Yeah. Of
oh shit, he's not fallen. We're fallen. And then he does exactly what Orlock does, which is bite this guy's neck out.
Yep.
And then he's out running. It's he's coming. My lord is coming. He's here.
Master. Oh my goodness.
A lot of religion to how he describes him, by the way. It's very similar
Yes.
to in the Herzog one of amen,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I really do think that this movie is sort of, it's at 6s and 7s as far as what significance religion has versus science has,
Yeah. It's it's significant to the degree that people are religious. It's not significant to the degree that religion matters.
Right.
It's just a fact of their world.
Right. Anyway, Thomas does come back.
Right. And it's a wonderful moment that mirrors the original movie.
Yeah.
He's here. It's who's he?
And he falls off his horse. And he's very sick. He's a sick boy.
Which, by the way, you fall off a horse, like, you could die.
Oh, my God, yes, I was thinking that. He falls onto cobbles. I was like, props to that stunt person. It did not look like there was a pad underneath there.
I bet there was, and they digitally.
I'm sure, yeah, but like, oof. Horses are tall, man.
It'd be funny if that's just where Thomas died.
He made it all the way back. He does remember Ellen, but he is very sick.
He's out of it. He's not comatose, but he is still recovering.
Right.
Which is a good way to kind of... And he's still staying at the poor Hardings. Yes. Which, by the way, they're not neighbors. Like...
No, they're not neighbors. We see how long it takes them to get back to their own house later, and it's a minute. But Anna thinks she's right, because Ellen almost immediately snaps back to herself. And it seems like the mere presence of her husband has rightened her.
Yeah.
Has returned her to her right. Like she was a wife without a husband, therefore she went crazy.
Yeah. Although that first night that she and Thomas share a bed together, you know, I think this is after it's already been established that the plague has fully come, and we've got the plague. They're in a bed together. He's kind of shivery and sweaty and having nightmares. And when he looks at her, you know, he's saying, he's in his nightmares, he's saying, like, get off me, get off me. He looks at her, he sees Orlock and throws her off. Mm-hmm. And God, if I didn't read that as a rape metaphor.
Yeah.
Like.
Or a trauma response to.
Yeah, no, specifically like the psychological ramifications of being a rape victim. Mm-hmm.
There's something that we don't have time to talk about now. But we should, or somebody should at some point write about how Dracula deals with male rape.
Yeah. There was a...
If someone hasn't, maybe they have. There
was a viral meme going around where it's like here's the plot of Nosferatu, and it's like a tweet that's like, I'm gonna fuck her, man. And then he deletes it and says, I'm gonna fuck her, comma, man. But yeah, no, it's really yeah, no, like they can't, he still can't give her what she needs from him, because now he is a victim going through trauma, and he's just not there yet. Yeah. You know, and you know, she has to go spend time with Anna in Plague over Weinberger. What do you think about how this movie depicts Plague versus the other versions?
I feel like this is actually, because it was made like mostly post-COVID, and obviously written pre-COVID, but you know, I think Eggers has said something about, I'm like legit losing my voice. We've been talking for so long. But I think Eggers has said something about like having masks in the original version that he took out because that would be too modern, I guess. But like, I do feel like it is a little more conscious or self-conscious than it is maybe in other versions. But at the same time, it's still very confusing and supernatural, right? Because like what Anna and the children die of is not the plague, even though they have the plague, you know, allegedly.
Well, I mean, it's interesting on that front because, you know, Sievers has Von Franz look over the body of the ship captain. Is like, this one's different. Mm-hmm. This one does have plague, but it looks like something sucked all his blood out of him, which implies that that's not happening to everybody.
Right.
But that's the thing that tells Von Franz that there's a vampire. But like, in terms of the depiction of the plague, it's interesting that I feel like in Eggers' movie, the subject of the image is almost always a person. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, we're almost always following an actor around, and there's mise en scène, and we're moving through locations and scenes and setups and whatnot, but we're always kind of focused on a person. And I feel like you look at the original movie, and you have these tableaus of, you know, wide shots of people carrying caskets and, you know, crosses on doors. And in the Herzog one, we have the apocalypse dances, right? And we have just overwhelming number of coffins and whatnot. We're just kind of in that moment. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, it's almost backdrop, which is interesting. Yes. And also, it strikes me that in the other versions, the plague feels like a natural outcropping of Orlock, and in this one, it feels like a directed weapon.
Yes.
Because he's moved into his house, which I'm sorry to say is not the same structure as the prior two buildings. I did miss it.
Damn.
It's not nearly as iconic.
He also immediately starts being very, very mean to poor Knock.
Poor Knock. It's like Klaus Kinski, like his like Dracula. Like Renfield goes up to him and he's like, oh, my master, and Drac's like, I don't like you.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's like, silence, dog, slap.
Yeah.
And
again, very, very Wormtail.
Yeah, and he even like fully tells him like do not want things of me. Like I'm not here. I don't give a shit about you.
Well, again, it's social structure, right? Like he is at the top of the food chain.
I'm the Lord.
The Lord.
Yeah, and it's here that he says that Ellen has to give herself willingly according to the contract, which he wrote.
Okay, this is one of my beefs with the movie. Obviously, I'm pro consent, and I like consent being demonstrated in films. That's really not relevant to this.
This isn't consent.
It seems kind of silly to me that having brought onto her the phenomenon of Orlock, like onto herself the phenomenon of Orlock, back when she was a kid, now she has to consent again, and it's not enough for her husband to sign the contract and be paid. Like this is where I think the fairy tale rules like seem a little bit like stretched for maybe our sensibilities. Like on the one hand, I like that it's the monster who's like, it must be your consent. You must say yes. It has to be you. Do you consent? Yes. Is it your consent? Like, Thomas doesn't get that, but at the same time, like I do really feel that I wish it had been set up in that whatever mechanism had to be triggered for this, like, spiritual marriage to be valid.
It's magic rules.
Yeah, exactly. This feels like a double beat to me, honestly, and I hate double beats.
Yeah, and it's also coerced consent. Mm-hmm. It is interesting to me that like for somebody who just takes whatever he wants, she's the one thing he can't just take.
Right. There are interesting aspects to it. I don't know.
Yeah. By the way, just talking about double beats, here's one of my criticisms of the movie. Mm-hmm. And again, really, really, really like this movie. Really do. One of my favorites of the year, and I think going to be a classic. Upon rewatch, I think I sort of figured like what my struggle with it is. Mm-hmm. So aside from what I mentioned before about how it's so much more compelling to me when there's a limited point of view, that was always scarier to me than now that we're like, we have our ensemble, they're all kind of discussing the situation. Mm-hmm. Like I never felt that they were unsafe in those scenes. Mm-hmm. But also I feel like there's a lot of talking, and like
yes.
Eggers is good at dialogue. It sounds great. It sounds theater. You feel the theater, and it's never staged theater. It's always staged very cinematically. It'd be
so cool if he did a theater production.
Yeah, but like I'm talking about like in the movie, like it's very it's very cinematic, but there are some scenes where I'm like, this sounds great. I wish you weren't talking right now. Mm-hmm. Like I don't need Orlock to soliloquy.
Right.
I don't need Friedrich to soliloquy. I don't need Willem Dafoe to narrate over scenes where I feel like silence would be more interesting.
I think one of the issues that people have with the movie is its length, and I think that contributes to it, and I think that's fair.
And I think it contributes to the feeling of it specifically, because I feel like if you have the exact same scenes, but some of them you just pull out the dialogue, mm-hmm. you feel the variation more.
Right.
Whereas here, I feel like it's a better movie to watch with your eyes open, but you could watch it with your eyes closed after a point. After a point in the story. It becomes, once we are back in Germany, we get a lot of describing what we know.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of catch-up of what we know. Like von Franz, it's like that, like, Nock escaped. Like, oh, that must be real. No, he's not the vampire, but he made contact with the vampire. Let's find proof of that. Oh, I found proof of that. I found his book. I found his codex. I found the evidence of how the vampire works. And it's a lot of stuff that we know.
Yeah.
And also you have a lot of Friedrich doing the whole science versus religion thing of like, you're mad, it's plague.
Yeah.
But I just wish, if you're going to have scenes like that, and you can, and it's great, Bela Lugosi is always the most compelling when he's not talking. Mm-hmm. Because we know what he's like when he talks. And when he's not talking, we know that like that's when he's fully being himself, and he doesn't need you. Mm-hmm. Orlock doesn't shut up.
Right.
Like
he has the gift of gab.
He does.
Well, I guess he's finally got an audience.
Yeah, but like in the first half of the movie, he's able to stop talking once he's got what he needs. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, like he dismisses, in this scene particularly, that's what made me think about it. He swats Nock aside, but then he continues to talk about like, I must do this. I have this plan. I have to do this. It's like, why does he need to hear that? Well, he wants to hear that from you. Why do you care if he hears that?
Right.
And why do you need to say it? And I wish that there was less of that. But that's, that's a me thing.
I think that's valid. However, things are getting worse.
things are getting worse. We have the first night.
Is this when they're when Anna and
Anna. There's a wonderful little jump scare, which, by the way, the moments where people do not talk really stick in my brain.
Yes.
So like Anna kind of wandering her house at night, we pan away. There's nothing there. We pan back. She turns around and there's Ellen. Mm-hmm. Ellen is like, I need to sleep with you tonight. They sleep in the same bed. They are fully in love. It's like, oh, the light of my life, the heart of my heart. I'm going to kiss you on the face now.
But I think this is also, like, I mean,
it's a full friendship.
If you want to read it as queer themed, I think that's totally valid. But
it doesn't feel sexual.
No, and I think also it's part of understanding like what their lives were like before they entered the society that required them to become wives.
Yeah, and it's also a response to a scene that we didn't talk about, because there's a sort of a sequence of scenes where, Ellen is basically talking to Anna and saying, like, I know what's going on here. I'm not crazy. You all thought I was crazy. I'm not crazy. And, like, Anna, like, sometimes says the wrong thing and regrets it. And, like, in this scene, Anna's like, I'm sorry to have been, like, mean to you earlier. I don't want to be mean to you. Mm-hmm. So this is like them being their authentic selves.
Yeah. And then she gets ratified.
Yeah, well, ratified by Congress. No, Orlock does his beautiful hand shadow across the city thing. And like, considering that this movie doesn't do a lot of the same shots as the original, but we're doing stuff in its vein, like, this is an iconic image. Yeah. Orlock casts his hand across the entire Wisberg. He says a spell while doing this. It's like, okay, so the shadow is a thing he does. It's not a thing that he is. Mm-hmm. But he teleports into Ellen's room. They have their first real dialogue scene where he's like, I fucking hate how much I love you.
Yeah.
And she's like, I hate you too. I'm going to sniff you. And they're fully in each other's face. It's very Heathcliff Cathy, Wuthering Heights. It's very Beauty and the Beast. He's like, I was asleep for like millennia until you woke me up. You are my affliction. I cannot love, but I cannot be sated by anything but you. And she's like, I hate you so much. I hate it. And they're just getting face to face to face to face. And he's like letting her remember things that she had forgotten. But like, when she finally says like, I hate you, he, wife beater slaps her.
Yeah.
Tosses her to the ground. It's like, you want me to prove my enmity as well? And he's like, you have 3 nights tonight is the forest. And he has that whole, that whole spiel about like each night that she doesn't consent, which is not consent, but each night that she doesn't consent, he's going to kill somebody that she loves. And, and like, this is what she gets for denying herself. Mm-hmm. And she says, denying myself, you tortured me. Which is like really framing what happened to them to her when she was younger, as just sort of, he was like psychically raping her the whole time.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the fairy tale-ness of 3 nights and, what Midnight Gone, etc. I also feel like this is just a good place to mention the Phantom of the Opera comps, which we've had before. But at least in the Broadway play, show, whatever, musical, that is like really key. Like she had Christine, the main character, calls the Phantom like her angel of music, and she says like he came to her, and taught her how to sing and was like an angel and blah blah blah, and then transformed into this like horrible coercive, demon-y relationship.
Yeah. Well, it's also the big contrast with the Coppola version, which, Eggers is also, he's a big fan of. Mm-hmm. And in that one, you have a big...
There we disagree.
There we have the big demon romance thing that's very, like, star-crossed lovers. Mm-hmm. And here it's demon romance as this is a toxic, evil thing. Mm-hmm. And the big sort of uncomfortable thing here is whether Ellen believes that she is toxic and evil. Mm-hmm. For having wants, which I think is so interesting. But like, yeah, it's framed like they're going to make out. Mm-hmm. He looms over her. She stares him down. Like, there's no flinching. It reminded me a little bit of the Isabella Johnny scene with Klaus Kinski. Mm-hmm. But because You have denied yourself. So she wakes up, and there is Anna on the floor, covered in rats.
With a boob out for some reason.
Her boob's out. Apparently, that was really unpleasant on set because those rats were shitting everywhere, all over her, and it smelled horrible.
I think Emma Corrin uses they them pronouns.
Yes. When I say she, I mean Anna.
Yes.
But yeah, deeply uncomfy. Bit by rats. Got the plague. Shadow of Orlock's hand on Ellen's face. Anna's all plaguey. Ellen's like, Friedrich, believe in me for God's sake. And Friedrich's like, I don't like you. I mean, he doesn't say I don't like you, but she says you don't like me.
Yeah.
And that's their big fight.
Yeah. And this is, I wish I remember the dialogue a little bit more specifically, but it really to me felt like, you know, him as the avatar of society and her as the radical element, you know, the uncontrollable element. And he's like, I brought you into this house, you know, like I've done all the things that I'm supposed to do. I've, you know, taken care of you. I've like checked all the boxes. And what have I gotten for it? My wife is sick. Everything's going crazy. There's plague. You're talking about vampires. There's this crazy von Franz guy who won't leave me alone, you know? And obviously she's right in this, and it gets really heated.
Yeah, no, it's
we have dual-sided dialogue.
It's a fight, yeah. Yeah, so Ellen says, why do you hate me? Pause. Harding is shocked by her candor. Harding says, how dare you speak to me in that marked manner? Ellen says, you have never liked me. Never. Harding says, know your place, madam. And
there we go. That's the line. That's what's important.
Yeah, and Harding's like, I have done everything in my power to be kind to you for these long months.
You might even say, know your posture.
Yeah. And it's Harding is enraged. He wants to scream because he feels like he is owed for all of his kindness, and like to a degree, you kind of have to like sympathize.
Yeah,
it's just that she is in such a bad place, right? And it's so clear that there's something like horrible going on.
Right.
And he's not going to extend himself any further than he already has.
He doesn't do what Severs does, which is adapt to the situation.
Yeah. So he kicks them out. It's like, I'm no longer going to be, you know, I'm not going to... He says, like, Hartman will call you a coach at my expense, of course. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Ellen's trying to say, like, she's going to die, she's going to die, she's going to die. It's like, he doesn't believe her. They walk home through the plague. I'm looking at the clock again.
Yeah, they limp home.
They limp home through the plague.
It's very plaguey. And then, well, I guess which part do you want to do first? Do you want to stay with Thomas and?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of know that like von Franz is you know on the warpath about the vampire, and Friedrich doesn't really believe in it. We get some double beats there, but then we have this big scene, which is the other scene that Lily Rose Depp auditioned with, mm-hmm. where Thomas is like, I need you to know something. This is all like, I'm lucid now, and I got to tell you that the devil's here, and he's here for you. And she's like, I know, he's my guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This guy's been a thing.
And she like throws she's like, basically, you did all this for money, you know.
Well, she has a shift, yeah. Right? She starts off kind of like,
oh well, I mean I don't think there's a single scene in this movie where she only has one mood.
Right, but it feels almost like she's possessed for a second,
yeah.
because she's apologetic at first, and then she looks away from it, and then something comes over her, and then she starts, you know, she has a line of, don't touch me, I'm not to be touched. Then she looks away. It says, in the script it says, a shadow passes through the room. Orlock's breath is heard. The shadow passes over Ellen. Her eyes change. Her tone becomes leaden. And so that's what I felt that, but it's not super obvious in the movie that that's what's going on. It could still be her. Mm-hmm. But she starts becoming cruel to Thomas.
Yes. And
she also starts using Orlock's sentence structure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Did not you think of me in that castle? which is the Orlock way.
That's great.
Yeah. And she starts getting all Isabella Johnny in possession. She's throwing herself around while yelling at him about how he sold her. He doesn't care about her. He's nothing.
White-eyed, yeah. Tearing her dress.
She's like, yeah, she's tearing her dress. And he must be really hard right now because of what happens next. Because she starts to put on like a big possession face. And he's like, I'm going to go get a doctor. She's like, no, don't do that. And then she says, you could never please me as he could. Mm-hmm. And that's when he immediately jumps on her and they have the rough sex. And mm-hmm. I guess it's consensual because she says, yes, take me. Right.
I thought it was very... I read it as consensual when I saw it.
I was a little on the fence just because I felt she was a little possessed.
Interesting.
I wasn't quite sure how much of it is
yeah,
her.
But what are the rules?
Yeah. But like, narratively, it's consensual. Yeah. It's you know.
Well, see, the reason I think it's consensual is because she starts screaming at Orlock while they're doing it.
Yeah, like watch our love. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, it's very much Thomas claiming his power when he has not had any.
Right.
And you know, they end the scene kind of in each other's embrace, but very unhappy.
Yeah. But you know, I think it reinforces this is the dark night of the soul for their marriage.
Yeah.
And after this, like, they are very much aligned. Like, things haven't gotten better, but they are in a better place.
Yeah. We gotta move quick because I gotta think of an.
Oh, geez.
Night number 2. There is a monster under the bed.
Yep. Anna is killed by Orlock.
But only after her babies are.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. Also, he like puts Friedrich to sleep, which I actually thought was kind of a cop out.
Yeah, it's also very, you know, like masculine normative of like, well, I can't let the guy intervene.
Well, it you know, I mean, I guess it's like lampshaded a little bit because he's like, I haven't slept in days, like, you know, he's been trying to manage everything. So the fact that he is like out cold does make some sort of like logical sense.
Yeah. But yeah, Orlock eats the babies, and then he eats Anna.
Yep.
And the next day we have the funeral with the very, very small boxes.
Yeah.
And everybody's dressed very Tim Burton-y.
Mm-hmm.
Friedrich yells at Ellen. And then Thomas does what he should have done earlier, but I guess he wasn't lucid enough, and it's kind of inconvenient that he was kicked out when he was, because he's like, I have bite marks on my chest. But yeah, everybody's you know, on board now, right? Like, Thomas knows where Orlock is. Friedrich he has his outbursts, but everybody forgives him, which I love.
Yeah, me too.
And Von Franz has a word with Ellen.
Yeah. And he basically tells her what's up, like what she has to do.
Yeah, she's gotta fuck her stalker.
Whatever all the memes saying, you gotta bounce. You
have to bounce on that thing crazy style. But but like, she basically knows it already.
Yeah. He's
basically just kind of giving her, I guess, sort of like, permission's the wrong word, but I guess just sort of like
confirmation.
Yeah, like validation.
Yeah.
This is the scene where he says he's a tourist.
Right. Exactly.
And it's a big, you know, they're setting her up for a big sacrifice. He's going to have to lead everybody else on a false hunt, as he describes it. Mm-hmm. And she has a halo in this scene, right? Oh. She has her black halo.
Oh, yeah. With the bonnet. Again, the costume's incredible. I thought it was really interesting that, like, Ellen tries to put Thomas in a powerful position, because she's like, don't come back until he's dead. Promise me you won't.
Yeah. He still thinks he's the protagonist.
Exactly.
God bless him.
Yeah.
But, you know, she would have been a priestess of Isis.
Yeah.
And by the way, I love the framing of this movie is always really intentional, mm-hmm. right? And the framing in this scene, Von Franz, when he's saying, like, you are the most important thing in the world right now, and like, you are not you are in the wrong era. Mm-hmm. Like, we're looking up at him. It's a very heroic shot. Mm-hmm. It's not subtle what this movie thinks about about that kind of
right.
that kind of like, hey girl, this is your story. Like, but there is something kind of weird about putting the man on the pedestal for saying it.
Yeah.
It's like, Von Franz isn't Justin Baldoni, but...
Well, yeah, okay. We can come back to that in the last scene. But I think we should touch a little bit on the necrophilia elements.
Yeah, Friedrich has a soliloquy in a tomb.
Yeah, he goes back to his family's tomb and basically sleeps with his wife's corpse, which I felt...
While quoting Shakespeare.
Yeah, he needed, I think... Okay, I go back and forth on this because, honestly, like, the explicit combination of sex and death is so Dracula, so Nosferatu. Like, it is on theme. I don't think it's not. I think for this character, even though I think it needed to be a little bit less subtle than like the one like I can't keep away from her like reference. Like I think they needed a sex scene basically. Like while she was sick, he was like, you know, something like that.
It's one of those scenes that I think would have benefited from less talking because one of the things he says in this scene is about their unborn son. Mm-hmm. If that was the only thing he said, then that would have contextualized the whole thing, right? He lost what he owned essentially, you know. But yeah, this is the closest thing that we get to a Nosferatu movie where the Lucy analog, is a vampire that returns, but she doesn't. You know, it's just her body. So you know, Friedrich dies in the embrace.
Because he suddenly has plague too, so
he's got plague.
It really does kind of feel like whoever has plague, Nosferatu has just been like, or Orlock has just been like, you have plague now. You have plague now.
Yeah,
you know?
It's super direct. It's part of his magic.
Yeah,
it's not just like the fact that he is odious in existence. Mm-hmm. It's a thing he's doing. The male gang, go off in the canals of Germany.
Yeah.
to Castle Orlock II.
Yeah.
They find the popcorn bucket.
So many rats. They walk through the carpet of rats.
Thomas has his steak in hand, but it's the wrong dude in there. It's Knock. And Knock's like, man, I thought I was going to get better than this. And Ron Smiles like, fuck you, dude, and just kills him.
he seems to have, like, that's his most human moment. He, like, seems to have some regret that this is where he's been brought to. I will say that I think...
He promised he'd make America great again.
Oh, God. We can do that on the follow-up episode. But, like, I think the difference in terminology as far as, like, who has to make the sacrifice, because in the original, it's, like, a righteous woman, right?
Yeah.
And in this one, it's a fair maiden.
Yeah.
And she's not a maiden. She's a married woman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's divorced now, but...
She's weirdly bigamous, actually. It's kind of strange.
Yeah. No, here...
Spiritually.
Yeah, if in the Herzog... If in the original, it's because she's just, like, the perfect Christian woman. Mm-hmm. And in the Herzog one, she's just the only capable human. Mm-hmm. Here, it's like, she opened the box, she has to close it.
Right. Yes.
And by the box, I mean, yeah. But anyway, Von Franz very much enjoys lighting shit on fire, and he finally tells Thomas, like, by the way, you've been sufficiently distracted. Von Franz is having the best time of his life because
he's so happy.
Because it's like not his circus, not his monkeys, so he's just like enjoying this.
Yes.
But like, Orlock's in the house. We have some beautiful shadow tracking shots. Mm-hmm. She's in a wedding dress.
She is, or / a nightgown with a veil. Not sure.
It feels very weddingy, but it is. But it's the same thing, right? Yeah. It's the same motif.
Yeah. And she consents.
She quote unquote consents.
Well, yes. She verbally consents anyway.
Yeah. She enthusiastically relents.
But at the same time, I mean, I still don't know how I feel about this element of the film. But there is a certain degree that I think you can't deny that, like, she is getting something that she wanted in this scene.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, like, if textually she is relenting to the demands of essentially an abuser and a rapist, thematically she, and also just character-wise, she is also giving in to the yearning that she has been sort of trying to deny, or which has been uncouth to, appreciate. This is the first Nosferatu movie where the taking of Ellen is fully sex. They are both naked. It is the first time that she does anything naked in this movie. It's not with her husband; it's with Orlock, as you had pointed out. He bites her chest. At one, earlier she had asked Thomas to kiss her heart. She keeps him there while Thomas is running.
She pulls explicitly the Herzog.
She says more,
She says more. He starts to move away when he realizes it's getting late, and then she pulls him back.
Yeah.
Which I think you can doubly, again, read as desire and also the sacrifice, Because also, we should know, we've been tracking this a little bit, but, like, the bites look painful as fuck. Like, the sound design. Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it is.
Slurp.
Yeah. It's not, it doesn't look fun.
It's a full latch.
Yes, it is. That's a good word for it, even though that's a terrible word for it. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's very, it's at the same time, it's like horrible and incredibly beautiful, like bizarre, because also, of course, the sun does rise, and Orlock doesn't fully disintegrate, but kind of reduces and rots, I guess.
Yeah, he pulls from the Herzog. He doesn't burn up. His eyes do go white. It's the first time we can actually see the makeup in full light. Mm-hmm. He bleeds all of Ellen's blood out of him, I guess, right? Yeah. Out of his eyes and nose and mouth. And she's like holding on to him. Like while he's doing this, she's actually kind of rising up to him a little bit and kind of like caressing him. It's a beautifully disgusting death. Yeah. There's a part of me that wonders, like, could this have been Orlock's endgame? Because, like, in this version, he's been basically in an abyss happily until she woke him up. And there's a world in which maybe he turns her into a vampire. It doesn't seem to be a thing that he does to people.
Right.
But there's also a world where it's like, I just need to do this so that I can go back to the abyss. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the abyss. Like, the relationship is the abyss, kind of.
It's possible. I kind of feel like if that is the case, it's something that she is giving to him and not that he is asking for. Because I think, again, with his, like, domination thing, he couldn't be in that mindset. But, like, it was so much for him to, like, be like, I need you. Like, I can't be satisfied without you. That, but I like that read also. Like, I think it's very legitimate.
It's interesting how open it is, to these possibilities. We hear the crow of the cock.
Yep.
Which is, all the movies have that. We don't always hear it, but it's always there. He dies on her the second Thomas et al. Come home. Mm-hmm. I saw this in IMAX last night, and there's a close-up of Thomas's face while he's running home. And so it's just framed from, like, his eyebrow to his bottom lip, and it's just bouncing up and down. It's the size of a building, and it was so disconcerting. But they're home. It's in the same shot. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no cut between his death and their arrival.
Oh, interesting.
So it's, like, really just in that moment. Mm-hmm. She has a final moment with Thomas. She doesn't say anything, but, like, it's clear. He realizes he is not the protagonist.
Yeah.
He is not. Nothing has gone his way this entire movie. Von Franz
picks up her cat.
Well, but before he does that, he soliloquies, which I'm actually I really wish they had cut that because I just wanted to be in the moment.
Yeah.
But he scatters lilacs around the bed, which have been a motif throughout the movie. Lilacs and I guess death. And he picks up the cat. It's her spirit animal. It's Greta Schroeder.
Yeah.
He stares into the sun, and then we get the final shot of the movie, which I think is deeply iconic.
Yes, it is. I was really like, where are we going with this? And it's just a still shot of him lying on top of her.
Yeah.
The thing that I've only seen it once, but the placement of the blood beneath them, like, she is basically lying on a bloody bed. So there is, on top of all of the other stuff that is going on here, almost a birth imagery.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's, Eggers is very happy to explain that it's the death and the maiden motif that's been around for centuries. We always have images of the fair maiden in the arms of the horrible creature, death. Orlock here is completely shriveled up. Apparently the reference for this was a 5,000-year-old mummy that had been, like, found in, like, a mountain.
Oh.
Or, like, a bog body or something. So he no longer has any flesh on him, really. He's just bones.
Yeah.
But, like, with taut skin, it's so gross.
Yeah.
But she's still, like, perfect. Mm-hmm. And they're surrounded by lilacs.
Yeah.
And that's the final image of the movie.
Yeah. Lilacs and blood.
Lilacs and blood. This, it is a movie about sex and death. Yeah, but in the context of what is consent and what is societal pressure and gender roles, and it's an interesting movie. I mean,
it's a very interesting movie, especially almost if you go back to the very first, like, thing she says about, like, these flowers will only die anyway. Like, bringing that into this scene is an interesting, like, yeah, they'll only die anyway, but if you think of Ellen as the flowers, like, she saved the city,
Yeah, and in the original movie, she's the heroine kind of by chance, and in the Herzog one, she's she steps up to the plate. Here it's somebody claiming power in death.
And I don't think it's like, to me, I don't read it as like, oh, she had the power over him all along. I view it as like this was her battle to understand that what she wanted was not evil and to like step into that, without hating herself.
Yeah, it's not power to conquer evil. It's the power to accept that thing that she's been afraid of.
That she is not part of this society. Yeah. And she is going to do something that is distinctly not part of this society.
Yeah.
For as much as Orlock talks about contracts,
Yeah, she faces her fear and she fucks it to death.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's one thing that I love about this movie, and it's something that I love about Eggers as a director. He is somebody who knows what he wants, knows how to articulate what he wants, and can get that. And I love that this version isn't just a big budget modern remake of the original. It's a take.
Yeah, it is a take.
It's an interpretation. It doesn't preclude future interpretations. You can tell that this was made by somebody with stuff on his mind.
And I do think it's a little overlong, and I do think that, like you said, a lot of the dialogue maybe is gilding the lily somewhat. But I just think it's a very well done movie that has a very clear. I wouldn't say like it's explicit about what it wants you to take away from the themes, but it's very clear on what the themes are and what it wants you to at least think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do know that there is an extended cut coming.
Oh,
like a 3-hour cut.
How long have we been recording? 2 hours 48 minutes. Anyway, so maybe
did we have something to talk about? But yeah, I mean, now that you've seen all of these, how would you rate the Nosferatu movies, like from bottom up? What do you think?
Bottom up, is this including Dracula or just?
Yeah, let's do the adaptations, not The Shadow.
Okay, so 1992's Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula's bottom of the list. Sorry, sorry, Robert. Then I think 31, and actually I don't know, 31 and Herzog are probably tied for me. And then second is the original, and first is this one. Not because I necessarily think like this is a more iconic cinematic achievement or whatever, but I just really enjoyed watching it and like seeing all the other material that went into it. Like I don't know if I would have liked it as much if we hadn't been doing this, if we had just seen it cold, but like having all that background, I really, really, really love what this film is doing, and it was gorgeous to look at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my ranking is close to yours. I think my ranking would be slightly different. I feel like I kind of want to tie the new one at Herzog's.
Interesting.
Because
yeah, you really like the Herzog version.
The Herzog one is the one that has the imagery that I can't get out of my head. It just feels like purely cinematic, purely dream.
And it has a bedsheet rope.
It's true. But I would tie it with the new one because I think the new one is a very strong voice. I have my criticisms, like I mentioned. I think it's. I don't even know if it's overlong or if it just feels long because of the nonstop patter. But I do think it starts to drag in the second half. But I think what it's doing is so strong, and I think the way it exists, not just as a solo piece of art, but as an art in conversation with things that have come before.
Yeah. And
a rich history, which we have detailed over many hours. It's. I think it's literature.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Yeah.
And the critics tend to agree too. It's well received. Doing really well at the box office.
Yeah, it has. Oh yeah, more than doubled its budget.
Yeah, no, it's doing great on a $50 million budget, which I think is
getting toward tripling its budget, which is cool.
Yeah, no, and I think this one's budget rivals that of the Coppola one. Nosferatu, I mean, I had the thing that I had to say, but I don't feel like I have a ton to add.
I think I need to see it again. It's so Western in a way. I don't know why that is the word that came to my mind, but like it's so English, you know, that feels like almost, not that there aren't English things that are anti-Semitic, but the two schools are a little bit different, you know.
Yeah, and it's social values, like you mentioned, right? They're very modern Western as well, right? Even if the characters within it have different values,
right?
You know, this is the one.
The prejudice within the film is actually not toward. It's only toward Ellen, basically.
Yeah.
Even Knock kind of like.
Yeah, no.
Doesn't interact with other people enough to.
There's a little bit of racism towards the Romani.
That's true.
Which Orlock actually calls out, which is funny. He's like, yeah, there's an urban-suburban divide. I'm sure you wouldn't understand. But it's, you know, it's actually interesting, though. I do want to take it back a little bit, because I think, just about the values, because I think in The Witch, there is also a contrast between what the characters believe and what the world believes. Because I think ultimately that does have something to say about, you know, taking one's power in a world that is constricting you. I think of all of his movies, this one feels closest thematically to The Witch.
I hear that.
Which is a story about a young woman who is being repressed, and ultimately that her repression destroys everything.
But also that almost like comes out into something specific, right?
Yeah.
Like that transforms. Ellen, I think, doesn't transform. She becomes herself.
Yeah, she accepts herself. Self-acceptance.
She doesn't come out. She comes in.
Scaredy cat rating?
7.
Oh, you downgraded it.
Yeah. Did I?
It was an 8 in theaters.
Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, I have to see it again, but like, I'm not thinking about it when I'm going to sleep. Which I was afraid I would be. Probably tonight I will, but like, it's a scary movie, but it's not prohibitively scary.
Sure.
You know? Like, it feels like I'm watching a movie that is meant to be scary, but not a movie that's meant to, like, sear its images into my brain so that I can't sleep. You know?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is interesting to me that I feel like it's trying to be more of a scare the audience movie than the Herzog one.
It's kind of like... Yes, but one of the few other horror movies I have actually seen is Crimson Peak. Guess why? Because it has Tom Hiddleston in it, yeah. And I was surprised at how actually approachable that movie was. And I would kind of put this on a similar wavelength.
Oh, yeah, lavish gothic romance.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, totally. It's, there is a world in which somebody did a straight remake of the original Nosferatu just as a fright fest. But deciding to make it a lush period piece, gothic melodrama, you know, it's a different vibe. It's a different vibe, but it does have some scary stuff in there.
Yeah.
We got to wrap it up.
All right.
Do you have a line to end the season on?
Let's see where we can. First of all, thank you to our editor, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
Jamie Blumberg. You can find them online at jamberg.me. I'm so sorry. Avishai, where are you on the internet?
I am on Blue Sky at Avishai Weinberger. AVISHAIWEINBERGER. I am also on Instagram, Avishai Oddity, AVISHAI ODDITY.
Maybe shorten those a little bit.
Someone can figure this out. Maybe Jamie.
And I'm on both Instagram and Blue Sky at InkAsrain, INKASRAIN. All right, what quotes we out on?
I'll do the last one. What do you want to do?
All right, I want to do... Hang on. I need to find the exact quote. You know what it is. Okay. I've seen things in this world that would make Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb.
My good man, why did you do that? Which is what I have to say to us for doing a long-ass podcast series about every Nosferatu. But this was a lot of fun.
This was awesome. I'm glad. That's a wrap on season 1. Maybe we'll be back with some bonus episodes. But...
Yeah. If there's demand, there are fangs.
And on that note, farewell.
Fare thee well.